The crack of thunder couldn't mask the sound of Marshal Kane's rifle being cocked. "You've got Apache killers in that cabin." "Marsh," he shouted through the storm. Behind Ezekiel's weathered door lay two unconscious giant women, Apache royalty whose very presence meant death. But as Chief Nalish's war party crested the ridge at dawn, Ezekiel realized his act of mercy had triggered something far greater than survival. He'd unknowingly set in motion an ancient Apache law that would transform the entire frontier. Friends, I invite you to follow this incredible tale to its end, and please comment below which city you're watching from so I can see how far our story has traveled. The drought had lasted 7 months, turning Ezekiel Marsh's small ranch into a graveyard of cracked earth and broken dreams. Each morning he counted his remaining cattle down to just 12 head, now their ribs showing through dusty hides like the bars of a prison. The bank notices piled on his kitchen table, each one a countdown to foreclosure. 3 more weeks, maybe 4 if he was lucky, and everything his father had built would belong to strangers. That October evening started like any other in this cursed year. Ezekiel sat on his porch, watching storm clouds gather on the horizon, the same false promise that had teased him all summer. Thunder rumbled in the distance, but he'd learned not to hope. Hope was a luxury poor ranchers couldn't afford. "Just pass on by," he muttered to the darkening sky, taking another sip of bitter coffee. "Don't need you mocking me, too." But the storm was different. It came fast and violent, as if 7 months of denied rain had built into a rage that couldn't be contained any longer. The first drops hit like bullets, and within minutes the desert transformed into a battlefield of mud and lightning. Ezekiel scrambled to secure the barn doors, fighting winds that threatened to tear the planks from his hands. "Finally!" he shouted into the chaos, laughing despite himself. "Finally, you give us something!" The celebration was short-lived. Through the sheets of rain, he spotted movement near the well, 2 dark shapes that didn't belong. At first, he thought fallen tree branches, maybe debris carried by the flash flooding, but as lightning illuminated the yard, his blood turned cold. Bodies. 2 bodies lying motionless in the mud. Every instinct screamed at him to go back inside to pretend he'd seen nothing. Out here, 30 miles from the nearest town, getting involved in other people's troubles was a sure way to find your own grave. But something in the way they lay there, so still, so vulnerable, pulled at whatever decency the frontier hadn't beaten out of him yet. Ezekiel grabbed his rifle and lantern, pushing through the storm toward the figures. As he drew closer, his steps faltered. These weren't ordinary people. The women, and they were definitely women despite their size, were giants. The smaller of the 2 had to be over 6.5 feet tall, the other pushing 7. Their clothing was Apache, but unlike any he'd seen decorated with intricate beadwork that seemed to tell stories in patterns of turquoise and silver. "Dear God," he whispered, kneeling beside them. "What are you?" The taller woman's eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with an intensity that made him step back. Her hand, massive even for her size, gripped his wrist with surprising strength. "Save her," she gasped in accented English, nodding toward her companion. "Save my sister, please." Then consciousness left her again, her grip going slack. Ezekiel looked around the empty yard, rain streaming down his face. Every story he'd heard about Apaches flooded his mind. Raiders. Warriors, the recent conflicts that had left both sides counting their dead. Helping them could bring the whole Apache nation down on his head. Or worse, if the town found out, they'd hang him for harboring enemies. But that word please echoed in his ears. When had he ever heard an Apache say please to a white man? "Damn fool Ezekiel," he muttered to himself, setting down his rifle. "Your father always said your heart would get you killed." Moving them was like trying to drag fallen oak trees. The shorter woman, if you could call 6.5 feet short, was unconscious but breathing steadily. Up close, he could see a gash on her forehead, probably from a fall. The taller one drifted in and out of awareness, occasionally mumbling in what he assumed was Apache. It took him nearly an hour to get them both inside using a makeshift sledge made from an old door. By the time he had them laid out on his floor, his bed was far too small. Ezekiel was exhausted and soaked to the bone. The women looked even more imposing in his modest cabin, their presence filling the space in a way that made his furniture look like children's toys. He stoked the fire and began the delicate work of tending their injuries. The smaller sister, who the tall one had called Etel in her delirium, had that head wound and what looked like exhaustion more than anything else. But the taller one, Ayana, he'd heard her sister say, had a bullet graze along her ribs. "Someone was hunting you," he said quietly, cleaning the wound with whiskey from his precious remaining bottle. "What did you do to get shot at?" Ayana's eyes opened again clearer this time. She watched him work with an expression he couldn't read, part suspicion, part curiosity, part something else entirely. "You help us," she said, not a question but a statement of wonder. "Why?" Ezekiel paused in his ministrations. It was a fair question, one he wasn't sure he could answer. "Because someone asked me to," he finally said, "and because out here sometimes that's enough." She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "You do not know who we are." "Should I?" A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "Perhaps it is better you do not, but know this white man." "Ezekiel. My name's Ezekiel Marsh." "Ezekiel." She tested the name carefully. "You have done something either very brave or very foolish this night." "Story of my life," he muttered, securing the bandage. "Can you tell me what happened? Why were you out in that storm?" Ayana glanced at her sister, still unconscious but breathing steadily. "We were traveling. The storm caught us, and those who pursue us caught up." She tried to sit up but winced at the pain. "They will come here. You should leave us and save yourself." "Lady, in case you haven't noticed, this is my home. Such as it is, I'm not going anywhere." "Then you will die with us." "Well, wouldn't be the worst company I've kept while dying." He stood, joints protesting after kneeling so long. "You hungry? I've got some stew that's mostly edible." The look she gave him then was one of complete bewilderment. "You offer food to Apache women. Do you not know what we are to your people? Right now, you're injured folks in my home during a storm. Rest of it can wait until morning." As he ladled out bowls of rabbit stew, his last rabbit, but they didn't need to know that Etel began to stir. Her eyes opened slowly immediately, finding her sister. "Ayana." Her voice was smaller than Ezekiel expected from such a large woman. Young, he realized. Despite her size, she couldn't be more than 17 or 18. "I am here, little one," Ayana replied in English, probably for Ezekiel's benefit. "We are safe. For now." Etel's gaze shifted to Ezekiel, and he saw fear flash across her features. She said something rapid in Apache, and Ayana responded calmly, gesturing toward him. Whatever she said seemed to relax Etel slightly, though she still watched him like a deer watching a wolf. "My sister does not speak your language well," Ayana explained. "I told her you saved us. She finds this difficult to believe." "Can't say I blame her." Ezekiel set the bowls down within their reach. "Eat. You'll need your strength." They ate in relative silence, the storm continuing its assault on the cabin. Ezekiel noticed how they moved, even injured. There was a grace to them, a power held in check. These weren't just any Apache women. Their clothing, their bearing, the way even exhausted and hurt, they maintained dignity. These were people of importance. "The men hunting you," he ventured after a while. "Apache or white?" Ayana and Etel exchanged glances. "Both." Ayana finally answered. "We have complicated troubles." "Must be some kind of complicated to have both sides after you." "My sister refused a marriage," Ayana said carefully, "to someone powerful. It has created difficulties." Etel spoke sharply in Apache, clearly upset at the revelation. Ayana responded calmly but firmly. "She doesn't want you telling me," Ezekiel guessed. "She fears you will trade us for reward. There is certainly one offered." "How much?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Ayana's eyes narrowed slightly. "Enough to save your failing ranch." Ezekiel nearly choked on his coffee. "How did you—" "Your walls are covered in bank papers. Your cattle are few and thin. You have the look of a man watching his world end slowly." She tilted her head.
Yet still you helped us. Why?" He was quiet for a long moment, listening to the storm beginning to pass, its fury spent. "My father used to say that a man's true character shows in his worst moments, not his best.
When he has every reason to be cruel and chooses kindness instead, that's when you know who he really is." He shrugged. "Besides, I've got maybe 3 weeks before the bank takes everything anyway. Might as well do one decent thing before I lose it all." 3 weeks? Ayanna repeated thoughtfully. Much can change in 3 weeks. Before Ezekiel could ask what she meant, the sound of horses cut through the dying storm. Multiple horses moving fast. He grabbed his rifle, checking the load. "Friends of yours?" he asked. Ayanna was already on her feet, swaying slightly but determined. She moved to the window, peering out carefully. "Apache," she confirmed. "My father's men." "Your father—" She turned to him, and in that moment, with lightning illuminating her face, he saw the truth in her eyes, pride, power, and the weight of birthright. "My father is Chief Nalish of the Mescalero Apache. We are his daughters." Ezekiel's mouth went dry. Chief Nalish was a name everyone on the frontier knew. A war chief who'd fought the U.S. Army to a standstill more than once. A leader who commanded thousands of warriors. And Ezekiel had his daughters, fugitive daughters, bleeding on his cabin floor. "Well," he said faintly, "that certainly qualifies as complicated." The horses were circling the cabin now, their riders calling out in Apache. Etel responded from inside, her voice strong despite her injury. The riding stopped. "They want us to come out," Ayanna translated. "They say the chief demands our return. And if you refuse, then they will take us and likely kill you for interfering." Ezekiel absorbed this information with what he felt was remarkable calm, considering. "What do you want to do?" Both sisters looked at him in surprise. "You would give us choice," Etel asked in broken English, speaking directly to him for the first time. "It's your lives, your decision. I'm just the fool who dragged you out of the mud." Ayanna moved closer to him, close enough that he had to look up to meet her eyes. "You would stand against Apache warriors for strangers. Wouldn't be standing for strangers. Be standing for guests under my roof. That means something out here. Or it should." A voice called from outside, speaking English this time. "White man, we know they are within. Send out the chief's daughters, and you will not be harmed." Ezekiel looked at the sisters. Etel was gripping Ayanna's hand, fear evident in her young face. Ayanna stood proud but tired, the weight of decision clear in her expression. "Your choice," he repeated quietly. "Whatever you decide, I'll back it." Ayanna studied him for a long moment, then spoke in rapid Apache to her sister. Etel nodded slowly, though tears had begun to form in her eyes. "We will go," Ayanna announced. "But first you should know something, Ezekiel Marsh." She moved to the door, pausing with her hand on the latch. 6 months ago, a white rancher found a young Apache girl injured by a mountain cat. He could have left her to die, many would have. Instead, he treated her wounds and took her to the trading post at Bent Creek, made sure she got back to her people safely. Ezekiel frowned, the memory surfacing slowly. But she was just a child. Anyone would have... No. Ayanna cut him off. Not anyone. That child was our youngest sister, Ayanna. Our father has had men searching for the rancher who saved her to repay the debt. The girl's description, she smiled slightly. A tall white man with sad eyes and gentle hands who apologized for his poor medicine but did his best anyway. The weight of this revelation settled on Ezekiel like a physical thing. That's quite a coincidence. Apache do not believe in coincidence. We believe in the spirits guiding people to their destiny. She opened the door, revealing a dozen mounted warriors in the yard. "Brothers," she called in English, "this man is under the protection of blood debt. He saved Ayanna's life. Tell our father we come willingly, but this one is not to be harmed." The lead warrior, a scarred man with suspicious eyes, rode closer. "The chief will decide such things. You will come now." "Yes," Ayanna agreed. "But we tell our father everything, including how this man treated us with honor when he could have claimed reward." As the sisters prepared to leave, Etel stopped beside Ezekiel. In her broken English, she managed, "You, good man, I not forget." "Take care of yourself, kid," he replied. meaning it. Ayana was the last to leave. She towered over him in the doorway, rain still dripping from the eaves around her. This has not ended, Ezekiel Marsh. My father will want to meet the man who saved 2 of his daughters. Pretty sure one canceled out the other. We're square. She shook her head. You do not understand Apache ways. A debt of life is never canceled, only repaid or multiplied. You saved Ayana. Now you have saved us. The debt grows. I don't want... What you want matters less than what honor demands. She touched his shoulder briefly, her hand covering it completely. Be ready. When my father comes, your life will change. Then she was gone, mounting a horse with surprising grace despite her injury. The warriors surrounded the sisters and rode off into the night, leaving Ezekiel standing in his doorway, wondering what he'd just set in motion. The next morning brought clear skies and an unexpected visitor. Not Chief Nalish, but Marshal Samuel Kane from Largo Ridge along with 6 deputies. They rode up hard and fast, guns already drawn. Marsh, Kane called out before Ezekiel could even step off his porch. We know you had them here. Had who, Marshal? Kane dismounted, his hand resting on his pistol. He was a small man who made up for it with meanness and an inflated sense of authority. Don't play dumb. The Martin boys saw Apache riders leaving your property last night. 2 of them matched the description of the fugitives we're hunting. Didn't know it was illegal for Apache to ride through open country. It is when they're wanted for theft and assault. Kane stepped closer, his pale eyes narrowing. Those 2 Apache women stole horses and attacked the son of a chief when he tried to stop them. There's a bounty on them, $500 each, dead or alive. Ezekiel kept his expression neutral. That's a lot of money. More than enough to save this sorry excuse for a ranch. Kane gestured at the dilapidated property. So I'll ask you again, where are they? They left with their people last night. Their people? Kane spat tobacco juice near Ezekiel's boot. You helped them. I offered shelter during a storm. Last I checked, that wasn't a crime. It is when they're fugitives. Kane nodded to his deputies. Search the place. They tore through his cabin with unnecessary roughness, overturning furniture, emptying drawers. They found the bloodied rags from treating the wounds, the empty bowls from dinner. You fed them, Kane said, holding up the evidence. Gave aid and comfort to enemies. I fed 2 injured women during a storm. Didn't know they were wanted for anything. Ignorance isn't an excuse. Kane stepped close enough that Ezekiel could smell the whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. You're coming with us. Judge Carter will decide what to do with Indian lovers like you. On what charge? Harboring fugitives. Aiding enemies of the state. Hell, I'll think of more on the ride back. Before Ezekiel could respond, the sound of approaching horses filled the air. Not a few riders this time, dozens, maybe more. They crested the hill in a long line, Apache warriors in full regalia, and at their center an older man whose presence commanded immediate attention. Chief Nalish had arrived. Kane and his deputies scrambled for their weapons, but the chief raised one hand and his warriors stopped just outside rifle range. Nalish himself rode forward slowly, accompanied by 2 others. One was the scarred warrior from the night before. The other was a young woman, maybe 14, who Ezekiel recognized with a start, the girl he'd saved from the mountain cat. Marshal Kane, Nalish said in perfect English, his voice carrying despite the distance. You are on my land. This is American territory, savage, Kane snarled back. By treaty, any land within 50 miles of the reservation belongs to both our peoples during times of peace. Are we not at peace, Marshal? Kane's jaw worked furiously. You're harboring fugitives. 2 women who assaulted my daughters, Nalish interrupted calmly, who defended themselves against an unwanted marriage proposal that became violent. But that is Apache business to be handled by Apache law. They stole horses. Their own horses, gifts from me. Nalish's gaze shifted to Ezekiel. You are the one called Marsh. Ezekiel nodded, unsure whether admitting it would help or hurt his situation. The chief dismounted, an action that clearly made Kane nervous. Up close, Nalish was shorter than expected, but carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd never lost a fight that mattered. This is the man who saved Ayana, the chief announced, gesturing to the young girl. And last night, He saved Ayanna and Itel as well. He harbored fugitives, Cain protested. He showed mercy to the injured during a storm. Nalish looked at Ezekiel with eyes that seemed to see everything. Tell me, Marsh, did you know who they were? Not until after I'd already helped them, Ezekiel answered honestly. And when you learned, I figured they were your daughters and it was your business to sort out, not mine. Nalish nodded slowly. And the reward $500 for each, enough to save your land. Blood money's got a way of cursing everything it touches. For the first time, Nalish smiled. It transformed his weathered face completely. You speak like Apache, even with white skin. He turned to Cain. This man is under my protection. He has saved 3 of my children. By Apache law, he is family. Apache law means nothing here, Cain snapped. Then let us speak of American law. Nalish pulled out a rolled document from his saddlebag. This is the Treaty of 1851 signed by your president. It states that any white man who saves the life of an Apache chief's family shall be granted safe passage and protection in perpetuity. He handed it to Cain. Your own law protects him. Cain read the document, his face growing redder by the moment. This is about military conflicts. It doesn't apply. Does it specify military conflicts only? Nalish asked mildly. I have lawyers too, Marshal, good ones from Santa Fe. They assure me the treaty is quite clear. The 2 men stared at each other, a lifetime of conflict compressed into a single moment. Finally, Cain stepped back. This isn't over, Marsh. Indian lover like you won't last long out here. He mounted his horse roughly. And you, he pointed at Nalish, your daughters attacked the son of Chief Kuruk. That's intertribal business, but it won't end well. I will handle Kuruk, Nalish said simply. After Cain and his men rode off dust cloud, marking their angry departure, Nalish turned to Ezekiel. You have created complicated situations for yourself, Ezekiel Marsh. Seems to be a talent of mine, sir. Sir? Nalish chuckled. Warriors who have tried to kill me do not call me sir. Yet the man who saves my daughters does. He studied Ezekiel carefully. Ayanna tells me you are losing your land. That's my problem to solve. No, it is our problem now. Nalish gestured to his warriors. You are family. Family does not let family starve. I didn't help them for reward, which is why you must be rewarded. Nalish's logic was implacable. A man who does good without thought of gain is exactly the man who should gain from his goodness. This is how the world becomes better. Ayanna, the youngest daughter, had been translating for some of the warriors. Now she approached Ezekiel shyly. You do not remember me, she said in careful English. I remember. Mountain Cat got you pretty good. You were very brave. She beamed at the praise. You sang to me while you cleaned my wounds, a funny song about a frog. Ezekiel flushed slightly. Well, I figured it might distract from the pain. It did. She looked up at her father. This is a good man, father. Ayanna and Itel say so too. High praise from my daughters. Nalish mounted his horse again. We will camp nearby tonight. Tomorrow we will speak of the future. Your future, Ezekiel Marsh, which is now tied to ours, whether you wished it or not. As the Apache made camp just beyond his property line, Ezekiel sat on his porch trying to process how his life had changed in less than 24 hours. He'd gone from a failing rancher counting his last days to what part of an Apache chief's extended family, protected by treaty and tribal law. The sun was setting when he saw a familiar figure approaching. Ayanna walked with the same grace he'd noticed before, but without the urgency of injury. She'd changed into different clothing, still Apache, but somehow more formal, more befitting her status. May I? She asked, gesturing to the space beside him on the porch. It's your father's land, apparently. You can do whatever you want. She sat the porch creaking under her weight, and they watched the sunset in companionable silence for a while. You're angry, she observed. Not angry, confused maybe. Yesterday I was nobody. Today I've got the marshal wanting my head and your father calling me family. It's a lot to take in. Change often comes like storms, she said. Sudden and overwhelming, but also necessary. Your sister Etel, is she all right? She is well, frightened about what comes next, but well. Ayana pulled her knees up, a surprisingly young gesture for someone so imposing. The man she refused, Kuruk's son, he is not evil, just wrong for her. Too violent, too eager for war. Etel dreams of peace, of a world where Apache and white can trade instead of raid. Sounds like a good dream. A dangerous dream for an Apache chief's daughter. She looked at him sideways. What do you dream of, Ezekiel Marsh? He laughed bitterly. Used to dream of making this ranch work, of proving I could succeed where my father failed. Now I just dream of making it through each day. Small dreams for a man who saves chiefs' daughters. I'm not a hero. I couldn't leave you in the storm. Anyone would have... No. Her voice was firm. They would not. You keep saying this, but it is not true. Most would have left us. Many would have harmed us. Some would have sold us. You did none of these things. She stood towering over him even while he sat. My father will make you an offer tomorrow. It will seem too generous. You will want to refuse. Don't. Before he could ask what she meant, she was walking back to the Apache camp, leaving him with more questions than answers. That night, Ezekiel barely slept. He could hear drums from the Apache camp songs in a language he didn't understand, but found oddly comforting. When he did doze, he dreamed of storms and giants of Ayana's eyes, in the firelight of a future he couldn't quite see, but felt pulling at him like a tide. Dawn brought Chief Nalish back to his door this time with papers of his own. I have a proposition, Ezekiel Marsh. The papers in Chief Nalish's hands rustled in the morning breeze as he spread them on Ezekiel's rough-hewn table. The cabin felt even smaller with the chief inside his presence, filling the space with an authority that had nothing to do with physical size. Your bank? Nalish began his finger tracing the letterhead on one of Ezekiel's foreclosure notices. Is owned by Harold Morrison in Santa Fe, yes. Ezekiel nodded, wondering where this was going. Morrison owes me $3,000 in trading debts he has avoided paying through various legal tricks. Nalish produced another document. I propose to buy your debt from him. You would owe the same amount, but to me instead of the bank. Chief Nalish, I appreciate the offer, but I can't pay you any more than I can pay them. I am not finished. The chief's dark eyes held a glimmer of amusement. In exchange for the land's title remaining in your name, you would allow my people to use your ranch as a trading post. A neutral ground where Apache and white can meet safely. You would manage this post taking a percentage of all trades. Ezekiel stared at the papers, his mind racing. You want to turn my failing ranch into a trading post? Your ranch sits perfectly between the reservation and 3 white settlements. The location is why your father chose it, was it not? He saw the potential for connection, even if he never realized it. The marshal would never allow it. The town neither. The marshal cannot stop legal trade, and the town merchants will come around when they see the profit in Apache goods, our blankets, pottery horses. Nalish leaned back. But there is one condition that may trouble you. Here it comes, Ezekiel thought. The catch that would make all of this impossible. You must be adopted into our tribe, formally, legally. It is the only way to protect you from men like Cain, and the only way my people will trust a white man with their goods. The words hung in the air like smoke from a signal fire. Ezekiel stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, he could see the Apache camp warriors tending horses, women preparing morning meals. Among them, he spotted Ayana's tall form helping with the work despite her status. You're asking me to become Apache. I am asking you to become family. You would keep your name, your ways, but you would also be one of us, protected by our laws, our warriors. Nalish joined him at the window, and obligated by our customs as well. What obligations? To treat all Apache as brothers and sisters, to share your prosperity with the tribe, to stand with us in times of peace and conflict both. The chief paused. And to consider yourself eligible for marriage within the tribe should such opportunities arise. Something in the way he said that last part made Ezekiel look at him sharply. Nalish's expression remained neutral, but there was knowledge in his eyes. This is about your daughters. This is about many things. But yes, my daughters are part of it. Nalish moved back to the table.
Etel cannot marry Kuruk's son. She would rather die, and I believe her. But if she were to be courted by an adopted brother of the tribe, someone who has already proven his honor, you want me to marry Etel? Ezekiel felt the room spinning slightly. I want options that don't end in bloodshed between my tribe and Kuruk's. You would not be required to marry anyone, but your presence, your eligibility, it changes the conversation. Ezekiel slumped back in his chair. 3 days ago, his biggest concern was which cattle to sell last. Now he was being offered salvation with strings that might strangle him. I need time to think. Of course. But Ezekiel, Nalish moved to the door. Time is not our friend. Kuruk will respond to his son's rejection within days. The bank will move within weeks. And Cain
is already planning his next move against you. After the chief left, Ezekiel found himself unable to stay in the cabin. He walked his property, seeing it with new eyes. The well positioned perfectly for travelers to water their horses. The flat area near the barn ideal for temporary camps. The storage shed that could be converted to hold trade goods. His father had built better than he knew, creating infrastructure for a dream neither of them had imagined. You trouble yourself too much. He turned to find Etel standing behind him. In daylight, without injury clouding his perception, he could see how young she really was. Despite her height, there was something delicate about her, like a sapling that might grow mighty, but could still be snapped by cruel hands. Your English has improved remarkably in 2 days, he observed. She smiled shyly. I understand more than I speak, always have. It is safer sometimes to be thought ignorant. And you're neither. No. She moved to stand beside him, looking out at the ranch. My father told you his plan? He did. You do not like it. Ezekiel chose his words carefully. I don't like being anyone's solution to their problems. Even if solving our problem solves yours as well. She pulled a grass stem, twirling it between her fingers. You think we use you, perhaps, but you use us too for salvation of your land. Is this not fair? When you put it like that, I would not marry you, she said suddenly, then blushed furiously. I mean, I could not. You are kind, but you don't know me and I don't know you, and marriage shouldn't be a business transaction. Relief flooded her features. Yes, exactly this. She turned to face him fully. Ezekiel Marsh, would you be my friend? Not suitor, not husband-to-be, just friend. I have never had a white friend before. He found himself smiling despite everything. I'd be honored to be your friend, Etel. Good. Friends tell truth, yes, so I tell you truth. My sister watches you. Ayana. She's just ensuring I'm not a threat. Etel laughed, a surprisingly musical sound. My sister has stared down war parties without blinking. You she watches differently. She started walking back to camp, then paused. Think about my father's offer. Not for me, not for Ayana, but for yourself. This land wants to live Ezekiel. Can you not feel it? That afternoon, unexpected visitors arrived. Not Apache or lawmen, but 3 ranchers from neighboring properties. Tom Martinez, whose land bordered Ezekiel's to the east, led them, his weathered face grim. Marsh, we need to talk. Ezekiel invited them in, serving coffee he could ill afford to share. The men sat uncomfortably aware of the Apache camp visible through the window. We heard about last night, Tom began, about you harboring those Apache women. And we're here to say we understand why you did it. This surprised Ezekiel. Tom continued. My Maria reminded me that you helped birth our son when the doctor couldn't come. Henderson here, you helped him rebuild after the fire. And Watson, you gave him breeding rights to your father's prize bull for nothing when his herd got sick. Henderson, a usually taciturn man, spoke up. What we're saying is you've been a good neighbor, better than most. If you say those women needed help, we believe you. But, Watson added nervously, Cain's stirring up trouble in town, saying you're a traitor, that you're bringing hostiles down on all of us. The Apache aren't hostile, Ezekiel said firmly. They're trying to prevent a conflict, not start one. We know that, but fear makes people stupid. Tom leaned forward. We came to warn you. There's talk of riders coming vigilantes, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. The weight of this settled on Ezekiel's shoulders. It was one thing to risk himself, another to bring violence to the area. I appreciate the warning. We also came to say, Tom stood the others following, if you need help, really need it, send word. We remember our debts, Marsh. All of them. After they left, Ezekiel found Nalish and told him about the warning. The chief's face darkened. This changes timing, but not intent. We will post guards. No, Ezekiel said firmly. Apache warriors defending my ranch will only prove Cain's point. If they come, I'll handle it. You cannot stand against vigilantes alone. I won't be alone. Ezekiel made a decision that had been building all day. Chief Nalish, I accept your offer. Make me Apache, tonight before they come. The ceremony was simpler than Ezekiel expected, but more profound. As the sun set, he stood in the center of the Apache camp, surrounded by warriors and families. Nalish spoke in Apache, his voice carrying across the gathering while Ayanna translated softly beside Ezekiel. He speaks of your deeds, of saving Ayanna from the mountain cat, of sheltering us in the storm, of choosing honor over gold when you could have claimed bounties. Nalish switched to English for the next part, his voice ringing clear. Ezekiel Marsh, you have shown the heart of Apache, though you wear white skin. Do you accept the responsibilities of family? Will you protect our children as your own, share our struggles as your burden, celebrate our joys as your happiness? I will. Will you respect our ways while keeping your own building bridges where others build walls? I will. Then I name you Ezekiel Marsh, adopted son of the Mescalero Apache brother, to all here protected by our law and bound by our honor. A young warrior approached with a knife. Ezekiel didn't flinch as the man made a small cut on his palm, then did the same to his own, pressing them together. Blood to blood, the warrior said. Brother. One by one, others came forward, not all making the blood bond, but many offering words of welcome. When Etel approached, she surprised him by speaking in perfect English. Brother, she said formally, then winked. See, now no one can make us merry. Ayanna was among the last to approach. She towered over him, moonlight casting her face in silver and shadow. Brother, she said, but something in her voice made the word sound like a question or perhaps a regret. The celebration that followed was interrupted by the sound of many horses approaching. The vigilantes had come 20 strong faces, masked but intentions clear. They stopped just outside the camp's light, their leader calling out, Marsh, we've come for you, traitor. Ezekiel stepped forward, but he wasn't alone. Every Apache warrior moved with him, creating a wall of bodies. More surprisingly, Tom Martinez and his neighbors emerged from the darkness on the other side, rifles ready. Funny thing about vigilantes, Tom called out. They assume everyone agrees with them. The masked leader pulled his gun. Stay out of this, Martinez. It's not your fight. Man threatens my neighbor. It becomes my fight. He's harboring hostiles. He's running a legal trading post with treaty-protected partners, a new voice announced. A man in a suit rode through the vigilante line, several official-looking companions with him. I'm James Morrison from the territorial government. We received Chief Nalish's petition this afternoon. Ezekiel recognized the name Harold Morrison's son, the banker's boy, who'd gone into politics. Your father holds my mortgage, Ezekiel said carefully. Held, James corrected. The debt was purchased this afternoon by Chief Nalish's trading company, all legal and proper. Furthermore, the territorial government officially recognizes this location as a licensed trading post protected under federal law. You can't do this, the vigilante leader snarled. I can, and I have. Any violence against this establishment or its operators will be considered an attack on territorial commerce, punishable by federal prosecution. James rode closer to the vigilantes. I suggest you gentlemen go home. Now. Faced with Apache warriors, armed neighbors, and government officials, the vigilantes had no choice. They rode off, but not before their leader pulled down his mask, revealing Cain's deputy Brooks. This isn't over, Marsh. You've chosen your side. Remember that when the war comes. There's no war coming, Ezekiel replied. Just commerce and cooperation. We'll see about that. As the various groups dispersed, James Morrison lingered. Mr. Marsh, a word. They spoke privately near the well. James was younger than Ezekiel, but carried himself with the confidence of education and position. My father fought this transaction, you should know. He wanted your land for himself. Why didn't he get it? Because I reminded him that territorial growth depends on peaceful Apache relations. And Chief Nalish made it clear this ranch becomes a trading post, or all Apache trade goes through New Mexico instead of our territory. James smiled thinly. Father loves his principles, but he loves profit more. And you? What do you love? Progress. Real progress not just for whites, but for everyone. This trading post could be the beginning of something unprecedented. He mounted his horse. Don't fail, Mr. Marsh. Too much depends on your success. That night, Ezekiel couldn't sleep. He walked his property, their property now, he supposed, trying to imagine wagons full of trade goods, where now only dust settled. The Apache camp was quiet guards posted, but most sleeping. He found himself at the well drawing water to cool his throat when he sensed a presence. Cannot sleep, brother. Ayana emerged from shadow, moving silent despite her size. Too much change in too few days. Change is the only constant in life. She sat on the well's edge, the stone structure groaning slightly. You did well tonight, standing firm but not aggressive. You have instincts for leadership. I have instincts for survival. Not the same thing. Sometimes they are exactly the same thing. She was quiet for a moment. May I ask something personal? We're family now, aren't we? Yes, family. She seemed to taste the word. Why did you really accept my father's offer? Not the business reasons, the real why. Ezekiel considered lying, then decided against it. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, I saw a future worth fighting for. Not just surviving, but building something meaningful. And Etel? Is she part of this future? As a friend and sister, yes, nothing more. She will be relieved. She fears you are too kind to reject her if pressed. And what do you fear, Ayana? She looked at him, then her eyes reflecting moonlight like deep water. I fear that making you my brother was both the wisest and most foolish thing my father has done. Before he could ask what she meant, she was gone, melting back into darkness with the grace of someone born to move through shadows. The next morning brought the first test of the new arrangement. 3 Apache families arrived with goods to trade blankets, pottery, turquoise, jewelry. An hour later, white merchants from Largo Ridge appeared suspicious but curious. Ezekiel found himself translating not just languages, but cultures explaining Apache craftsmanship to whites, who'd only known Apache as enemies, describing white goods to Apache who'd only traded through limited channels. This blanket, he told Mrs. Patterson, the general store owner's wife, see the pattern. Each line tells part of a story. This one speaks of winter giving way to spring hardship, yielding to hope. The woman touched the weaving reverently. It's beautiful. How much? What do you offer? The negotiation that followed was more like a dance, each side learning the other's values. By noon, successful trades had been made and word was spreading. Chief Nalish watched from the porch Etel beside him. You have a gift, the chief observed. You make enemies into traders. They were never really enemies, just strangers afraid of each other. If only all conflicts were so simple. Nalish's expression darkened. Kuruk has sent word. He comes tomorrow to discuss his son's rejected marriage. Will there be violence? Not if I can prevent it, but Kuruk is proud, his son more so. They will demand satisfaction. That evening, as traders departed with their new goods and promises to return, Ezekiel found himself alone with Etel in the storage shed now being converted to hold trade items. You fear tomorrow, she observed, helping him arrange shelves. Shouldn't I? Yes and no. She paused in her work. Kuruk is harsh, but not unreasonable. His son Cholena is the danger. He believes I insulted him by refusing. Did you? Yes. Her honesty was refreshing. I told him I would rather marry a rattlesnake, for at least the snake warns before it strikes. Ezekiel couldn't help but laugh. That would do it. He struck me for the insult. That is when Ayana intervened. Etel's eyes went distant. She threw him through a tent. His warriors drew weapons, we fled. You know the rest.
Your sister is formidable. She is lonely. Tell's statement was simple but profound. Too tall for most men, too strong, too intelligent. Warriors fear her, others dismiss her as unnatural. Only in battle is she appreciated, and she hates battle. What does she love? Stories. She knows every tale our grandmother told, remembers every song. When she thinks no one watches, she writes them down, saving them. Tell smiled softly.
She dreams of a time when Apache stories are preserved in books like white stories, so our children's children will remember. That's a beautiful dream. Tell her that. She might believe it from you. That night the Apache camp was tense. Kuruk would arrive at dawn, and everyone knew the meeting could determine whether peace or conflict ruled the coming months. Ezekiel found himself unable to sleep again this time, sitting on his porch rifle across his knees just in case. You stand guard like Apache now. Ayana appeared. He was almost getting used to her silent approaches. Someone should. Many do. You are well protected, brother. She sat beside him, the porch creaking. Tomorrow will be difficult. Your father seems confident. My father is always confident in public. In private, he worries. She pulled out something from her bag, a leather-bound journal. Etel told you about my writing. She mentioned it. These are our stories, our history, but in my hand only, and if I die, they die with me. She opened the journal, showing pages of careful writing, some in Apache, some in English. I want to print them like white books, but no white printer will touch them, and Apache have no printing press. The trading post will change that. When it's successful, we can bring in a press print whatever we want. She looked at him with surprise. You would do this? Stories deserve to survive. All stories, not just the ones written by victors. She was quiet for a long moment, then suddenly leaned over and kissed his cheek, a touch as light as wind but burning like flame. You are a good man, Ezekiel Marsh. Too good for this harsh land. Before he could respond, she was gone again, leaving only the warmth on his cheek and the scent of sage in the air. Dawn brought Chief Kuruk and 50 warriors. Kuruk was everything Nalish wasn't, tall, broad-scarred from countless battles. His son Cholena was a younger mirror, handsome in a cruel way with eyes that promised violence. The meeting took place in neutral ground between the ranch and the camps. Ezekiel stood with Nalish's family, technically excluded from the negotiations, but present as family. Ayana and Etel flanked their father, both in traditional dress that emphasized their status. Brother Nalish, Kuruk began in Apache, which Ayana quietly translated for Ezekiel. Your daughter has insulted my son. Satisfaction is required. Your son insulted my daughter first by assuming ownership where none was granted, Nalish replied calmly. Her refusal was proper. His response was not. She compared him to a snake. After he grabbed her arm and wouldn't release it, Cholena spoke for the first time, his voice dripping contempt. I offered to make her a chief's wife. She should be grateful. Gratitude cannot be demanded, Etel said quietly but firmly. You dare speak in council? Cholena stepped forward aggressively. Ezekiel moved without thinking, placing himself between Cholena and Etel. She speaks as is her right. Cholena's eyes fixed on him with deadly intent. And who are you to interfere, white man? He is my adopted son, Nalish said, brother to my daughters, protected by our law. Adopted, Cholena spat the word. You give our blood to whites now, Nalish. You grow weak in your age. Careful, boy, one of Nalish's warriors warned. You speak to a chief who was winning battles before you were born. Kuruk raised a hand for silence. The white man is irrelevant. My son demands satisfaction for the insult. By our law, he can claim combat with the woman's champion. I am her champion, Ayana said, stepping forward. No, Cholena smiled cruelly. I will not fight a woman, even an unnatural giant of one. Her champion must be male. All eyes turned to Ezekiel. He felt the weight of expectation, understanding the trap. If he refused, Etel would be dishonored. If he accepted and lost, Cholena could claim her. If he won, well, white men didn't usually win against Apache warriors. I'll stand as her champion, he said quietly. Cholena's grin widened. The white brother wishes to die for his adopted sister. So be it. Terms? Nalish asked formally, though his eyes showed concern. First blood, Kuruk said somewhat surprisingly. We are not here for death, but for honor. Knives, Kalina added. Tonight at sunset. As the group separated, Ezekiel found himself surrounded by worried faces. Nalish gripped his shoulder. You should not have done this. Someone had to. Kalina has killed 5 men in knife fights, Ayana said, her usual composure cracked. You cannot face him. Then teach me. Ezekiel looked at her directly. You threw him through a tent. Teach me to fight him. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Ayana and several warriors took turns instructing Ezekiel in knife combat Apache style. He was a quick learner, but nowhere near Kalina's level. You cannot match his skill, Ayana said during a break, both of them sweating from exertion. You must use what he doesn't expect, which is intelligence. Kalina is all aggression and pride. He will expect you to fight like a frightened white man or try to fight like Apache. Do neither. As sunset approached, the 2 camps gathered in a circle. Kalina entered shirtless, his body a map of scars and muscle. Ezekiel kept his shirt on, having no impressive physique to display. Any man who yields or steps outside the circle loses, Kuruk announced. First blood ends the contest. Kalina twirled his knife expertly. Ready to bleed, white brother. The fight began with Kalina attacking, immediately his blade whistling through air where Ezekiel had been a moment before. The white man stumbled backward, barely avoiding the strikes, looking every inch the overmatched opponent he was. Stand and fight, coward, Kalina taunted. Ezekiel continued to retreat, dodge, stumble. The crowd began to murmur, was this even a fight, or just a delay of the inevitable? Then Kalina overextended his frustration, making him careless. Ezekiel didn't try to match him blade to blade. Instead, he grabbed a handful of dirt and threw it in Kalina's eyes, then brought his knee up into the warrior's stomach. As Kalina doubled over, Ezekiel's blade nicked his shoulder, barely a scratch, but blood flowed. First blood, Nalish called immediately. Kalina roared in rage, wiping his eyes. That was not combat. That was trickery. That was intelligence, Kuruk said quietly, and everyone turned to him in surprise. The white man used his advantages against your disadvantages, my son. You expected a knife fight. He gave you a survival fight. The chief looked at Ezekiel with something approaching respect. You fought like Apache pretending to be white. Interesting. The dead is satisfied, Nalish asked formally. It is satisfied, Kuruk confirmed, though Cholena looked ready to explode. But know this, Nalish, your family grows strange. Giant daughters who refuse marriage, white sons who fight with dirt. What next? Peace, perhaps, Nalish suggested. Trade instead of raids. Prosperity for all our children. Kuruk mounted his horse. We shall see. The trading post, I have heard of it. If it succeeds, my people will participate. If it fails, he looked directly at Ezekiel. Many things will fail with it. As Kuruk's party departed, Cholena lingered just long enough to whisper to Ezekiel, This is not over, white man. You won by trickery, not honor. I won by protecting my sister, Ezekiel replied. That is all the honor I need. That night, the Apache camp celebrated. The immediate threat was past. The trading post had its first successful day, and their adopted white brother had proven himself in combat, however unconventional. Ezekiel sat apart from the main celebration, his hand still shaking from the fight's adrenaline. He'd come close to death today, closer than he cared to admit. You fought well. Etel sat beside him, offering a cup of something that burned going down but warmed his belly. Different, but well. Your sister taught me that different might be my only advantage. She teaches well. She also watches you now, thinking you do not notice. Ezekiel glanced across the fire to where Ayana sat with other women, indeed looking his way. When their eyes met, she didn't look away. Your father made us siblings, he said carefully. That complicates things. My father is wise, but not all-knowing. What he makes, he can unmake if given reason. Etel stood. But that is tomorrow's problem. Tonight we celebrate survival. As the evening wore on, Ezekiel found himself drawn into the celebration. He learned Apache songs badly. He attempted traditional dances worse. But his genuine efforts earned laughter and acceptance, not mockery. Near midnight, when the fire had died to embers and most had retired, Ayanna approached him. "Walk with me." They moved away from camp toward the hill that overlooked the valley. The moon was full, turning the landscape silver in shadow. "You surprised everyone today," she said, "especially Kolena." "I surprised myself. I'm not a fighter." "No, you are something more dangerous, a thinker who can fight when necessary." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "Why did you really stand as Etel's champion? You could have let one of our warriors do it." "Because she's my friend, my sister now. And because—" He paused, choosing his words, "because I wanted your family to know I take the adoption seriously. I'm not just playing at being Apache for convenience. You could have died. We all die eventually. Better to die protecting family than withering away on a failed ranch." She stepped closer, and even in moonlight he could see conflict in her eyes. "You make things difficult, Ezekiel Marsh." "How?" "By being honorable when I expected calculation. By treating us as equals when I expected condescension. By looking at me as a woman when others see only a giant or a warrior." The last admission hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. "Ayanna, we are siblings now, yes, by my father's words and ceremony." She touched his face gently, her hand covering half of it. "But words can be changed. Ceremonies can be performed again. The question is, should they be—" Before he could answer, she was walking back to camp, leaving him alone with the moon and questions that had no easy answers. The next days fell into a rhythm. Mornings brought traders, both Apache and white. Afternoons meant organizing goods, keeping records, building trust, transaction by transaction. Evenings found Ezekiel learning more about Apache ways while teaching interested Apache about white customs and language. The trading post grew. What started as a few families became dozens. White merchants who initially came from curiosity became regulars, finding Apache goods sold well in distant towns. Apache who distrusted the arrangement saw their crafts valued and their needs met without raids. But it was the unexpected connections that truly mattered. Mrs. Patterson began learning Apache words to better negotiate. An Apache grandmother taught the banker's daughter to weave. Children who would have grown up fearing each other played together while their parents traded. "You've done something remarkable," James Morrison said during one of his official visits. "This place is becoming what the treaties promised but never delivered actual cooperation." "It's still fragile," Ezekiel warned. "One incident, one misunderstanding, and it could all collapse. Then we must ensure no incidents occur." But incidents, Ezekiel was learning, had a way of finding you whether you wanted them or not. The incident came 3 weeks later in the form of a dust cloud on the horizon. Ezekiel was negotiating a large blanket order with merchants from Santa Fe. When young Ayanna came running, her face flushed with urgency. "Soldiers come, many soldiers." The trading post erupted in controlled chaos. Apache traders quickly gathered their goods, ready to flee if necessary. White merchants stepped back, unsure whether to stay or leave. Ezekiel stood in the middle, trying to maintain calm while his mind raced through possibilities. The cavalry unit that arrived was 30 strong, led by a Captain Reynolds, whom Ezekiel didn't recognize. The man was young for his rank, with the kind of rigid bearing that suggested he'd earned his position through connections rather than experience. "You're Ezekiel Marsh." Reynolds didn't dismount, looking down from his horse with obvious disdain. "I am. This is a licensed trading post, Captain. All our papers are in order." "I'm not here about your papers." Reynolds gestured to his men, who spread out hands on weapons. "I'm here about reports of Apache raiders using this location as a base for attacks on white settlements." "That's absurd. No raids have originated from here. 3 days ago, the Stewart Ranch was hit. Cattle stolen, barn burned. Witnesses saw Apache riders heading this direction." Chief Nalish emerged from the main building, flanked by several warriors. His presence immediately heightened tension, soldiers gripping rifles tighter. "Captain," Nalish said calmly, "my people have not raided in months. We have no need. The trading post provides what we require."
Convenient that you'd say that. Reynolds finally dismounted, his hand resting on his saber. I have orders to search this place for stolen cattle and contraband. Your orders don't extend to harassment of legal trade. James Morrison's voice cut through the tension. He'd arrived with the Santa Fe merchants, and his political standing gave him weight even with the military. Captain Reynolds, isn't it your father and I serve in the territorial legislature together? Reynolds' jaw tightened. Mr. Morrison, this is military business. No, it's territorial business, and I represent territorial interests here. James produced a document. Judge Carter's injunction against military interference with established trading posts. You need evidence of actual crimes, not mere suspicion to search. I have witnesses who saw Apache, not these Apache. There are 12 tribes in this region, Captain. Would you arrest all of them for the crimes of a few? While the men argued legalities, Ezekiel noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Ayanna was quietly directing women and children away from the confrontation, while Apache warriors positioned themselves strategically, not threateningly, but ready. Then he saw something else. One of Reynolds' sergeants was edging toward the storage shed where several Apache families had placed their trade goods. The man's hand was moving toward a torch on his belt. Captain, Ezekiel said loudly, drawing attention, your sergeant seems lost. Perhaps he needs direction back to his horse. Reynolds turned to look, and his face darkened. Sergeant Mills returned to position. Mills hesitated, clearly having received different orders earlier. That moment of hesitation told Ezekiel everything. This wasn't about stolen cattle. Someone wanted the trading post to fail, and they'd sent Reynolds to make it happen. Captain Reynolds, Nalish spoke again, his voice carrying quiet authority. If Apache raiders struck the Stewart Ranch, I will find them myself. This is my promise. Give me 3 days. You expect me to trust Apache to police Apache? I expect you to trust a chief who has kept peace for 6 months when war would have been easier. Nalish stepped closer. 3 days, Captain. If I do not bring you answers, you may search as you wish. Reynolds clearly wanted to refuse, but James Morrison's presence and the political implications held him back. 3 days, but I'm leaving a detail to watch this place. As you wish, Nalish agreed. They will be treated as guests provided they behave as guests should. After Reynolds departed, leaving 6 soldiers camped just outside the trading post boundary, the various parties gathered to discuss the situation. This is Kane's doing, Tom Martinez said with certainty. He'd arrived during the confrontation along with several other supportive neighbors. He's been spreading rumors in town claiming raids that never happened or blaming Apache for white bandits' work. It doesn't matter who's behind it, Ezekiel said. If we don't find the real raiders, Reynolds will be back with more men and legal justification. Then we find them, Ayanna said simply. Tonight. The search party that assembled was unlike anything the frontier had seen. Apache warriors, white ranchers, and Ezekiel bridging between them. They rode out as the sun set, following trails that the Stewart Ranch survivors had described. Ayanna rode beside Ezekiel, her presence both comforting and complicated. Since their moonlight conversation, they'd maintained careful distance, aware that others watched them, aware of the taboo they danced around. You think we'll find anything? She asked quietly. Your father seems confident. My father knows something he hasn't shared. He often does. She adjusted her rifle across her saddle. Ezekiel, whatever happens tonight, be careful. This feels like a trap. She was right. 2 hours into their search, following tracks that led into a canyon, they found themselves surrounded. But not by Apache, by white men dressed as Apache, their disguises good enough to fool distant witnesses but obvious up close. Well, well, a familiar voice called out. Deputy Brooks emerged from cover wearing Apache war paint that looked almost comical on his pale features. The traitor and his savage friends right where we wanted you. You're the raiders, Ezekiel said, understanding flooding through him. You've been attacking ranches dressed as Apache to turn people against the trading post. Clever, isn't it? Brooks grinned. Kane's idea. Create the problem, then solve it by driving out the Apache. Except you had to complicate things by playing peacemaker. You're under arrest, Tom Martinez said, raising his rifle. Brooks laughed. By whose authority? You're just ranchers and savages. We're lawmen. Former lawmen, a new voice corrected.
Captain Reynolds rode into view, but his approach was from behind Brooks' position, and his soldiers had weapons trained on the disguised raiders, not on Ezekiel's party. I had my suspicions about the timing of these raids. Thank you for confirming them, Deputy Brooks. The capture was swift and efficient. Brooks and 12 other men, all either Kane's deputies or hired guns, were disarmed and bound. Among the evidence found in their camp were items from the Stewart Ranch and 2 others along with Apache clothing and war paint. You followed us, Nalish said to Reynolds, not quite a question. I followed them, Reynolds corrected, gesturing to Brooks. My orders were to investigate raids. I never specified which raiders I was investigating. He looked uncomfortable. I apologize for my earlier hostility. It was necessary to maintain the deception. You knew, Ezekiel asked. I suspected. Kane's been too eager to blame Apache and the timing. Reynolds shrugged. My father fought in the Apache wars. He always said the Apache were dangerous enemies, but honorable ones. These raids felt wrong, attacking small ranches for little gain, always leaving convenient witnesses. What happens now? Ayanna asked. Now Brooks and his men face trial for theft, arson, and impersonating federal officers, that last one being the most serious charge. Reynolds mounted his horse. And Marshal Kane faces questions about his deputies' activities. The ride back to the trading post was subdued despite the victory. They'd exposed the plot, but everyone knew this was just one battle in a larger conflict. Those who wanted the Apache gone, who wanted the races separated, wouldn't stop because one scheme had failed. That night, while others celebrated the exposure of the false raiders, Ezekiel found himself alone with Chief Nalish on the porch, sharing a pipe of tobacco as the elder man had taught him. You knew it was Brooks from the beginning, Ezekiel said. I suspected. The tracks where wrong white men walk differently than Apache, even in our moccasins. But suspicion is not proof. So you let Reynolds follow us knowing he'd see the truth. Sometimes the best way to convince someone is to let them discover truth themselves. Nalish was quiet for a moment. You have done well, my adopted son. Better than I hoped. But, the chief smiled. You know there is a but. There's always a but. But you are unhappy. You have everything you claim to want the ranch saved purpose family, yet you watch my daughter when you think no one sees, and she watches you. Ezekiel didn't deny it. She's my sister by your adoption. Adoption can be undone if there is cause. What cause would justify that? Nalish turned to look at him directly. Love would justify many things, but first you must be honest about what you feel, and she must be honest as well. Before Ezekiel could respond, Etel appeared in the doorway. Father Ryder's approach. It's Kuruk. The chief from the neighboring tribe arrived with only 5 warriors, a sign of peaceful intent, but his face was grim as he dismounted. Brother Nalish, we must speak. Alone. The 2 chiefs walked away from the buildings, their conversation too quiet to hear, but their gestures speaking of serious matters. When they returned, both looked troubled. Kolena is missing, Nalish announced to the gathered group. He left 3 days ago, saying he would prove himself worthy of Etel. Kuruk fears he plans something foolish. Or dangerous, Ayanna added quietly. What kind of proof would he seek? Ezekiel asked. Kuruk answered directly. My son believes his honor was damaged by losing to you through trickery. He spoke of reclaiming it through a grand gesture. I fear... The chief paused, choosing words carefully. I fear he may attempt to destroy what you've built here, believing it would prove Apache superiority. Destroy the trading post. Tom Martinez had joined them, drawn by the serious discussion. Or worse, Kuruk admitted. Kolena has followers, young warriors who believe peace makes us weak. If he convinces them to act, it would start a war, Reynolds said. He'd stayed after the capture of Brooks, sensing more trouble brewing. One real Apache attack, especially after we've just exposed the false ones, and I couldn't stop the military response. How many warriors might he have? Ezekiel asked. 20, perhaps 30, Kuruk replied. Young men eager for glory, they think peace denies them. Soon, perhaps tomorrow night, he would want witnesses to his triumph. The group dispersed to prepare defenses, but Ezekiel found himself intercepted by Ayanna. She pulled him aside, her grip urgent. "There is another way," she said quietly. "What way?" "Kalena wants to prove himself worthy of Etel. If she were married, his cause would be lost." Ezekiel's heart skipped. "She won't marry someone just to stop Cholena." "No, she won't." Ayanna's eyes held his. "But there is another solution. If you were no longer her brother, Ayanna, listen. If father released you from adoption, you would still be protected by treaty as the man who saved his daughters. But you would be free to choose differently. Choose what to marry Etel. She doesn't want that any more than not Etel." Ayanna's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Me." The word hung between them like lightning about to strike. Ezekiel felt the world shift, everything suddenly clear and terrifying at once. "You would marry me to stop Cholena. I would marry you because I've wanted to, since you stood between my sister and danger, since you fought with cleverness instead of pride, since you looked at me and saw a woman instead of an oddity." She stepped back, vulnerability replacing her usual strength. "But yes, it would also stop Cholena. He cannot claim a married woman's sister without cause, and he has no quarrel with me. Your father already knows my heart. He waits only for you to speak yours." Ezekiel's mind raced. 3 months ago, he'd been a failing rancher ready to lose everything. Now he was being offered not just land and purpose, but love, if he was brave enough to claim it. "This is mad," he said. "Yes. We barely know each other. We know enough. Your people, some will object, others will see it as binding the alliance stronger." She touched his face gently. "But I don't care about others. I care about your answer." Before he could give that answer, shouts erupted from the camp. Cholena hadn't waited for tomorrow night. He was here now, with 40 warriors all painted for war. They rode in hard, circling the trading post, whooping war cries that sent white traders scrambling for cover. Cholena himself rode straight to the main building where Nalish waited with his own warriors. "I come for what is mine," Cholena shouted. "The woman Etel promised to me by ancient law." "No law promises what was never agreed," Nalish replied calmly. "Then I invoke the law of challenge. Let any who would deny me face me in combat to the death. This time, this was the trap. If no one answered, he could claim Etel by default. If someone fought and lost, same result. If someone killed him, Karuk would be honor-bound to seek vengeance. I answer your challenge." Ezekiel stepped forward, but Ayanna caught his arm. "No, not this time." She looked at her father. "Father, I request release from adoption bonds for Ezekiel Marsh." The crowd murmured in confusion. Nalish studied his daughter's face, then nodded slowly. "For what cause?" "For marriage. To me." The explosion of reactions was immediate. Cholena's warriors shouted in outrage. White traders gasped in shock. Even Karuk looked stunned. "You cannot," Cholena snarled. "He is your brother." "Not anymore," Nalish said quietly. "I release Ezekiel Marsh from adoption, though he retains all protections of one who has saved my blood. He is free to marry whom he chooses." And I choose Ayanna," Ezekiel said, stepping beside her, "if she'll have me." "This is trickery." Cholena's hand went to his knife. "This is love," Etel said, surprising everyone by speaking. "Something you would not understand, Cholena. My sister chooses happiness. I choose freedom. You have no claim here." "I'll kill him." Cholena started forward, but his own father's voice stopped him. "Enough." Karuk had moved between the groups. "My son, you shame me. You shame yourself. Coming here painted for war like a child playing at warrior games." He turned to his warriors. "Any who follow my son in violence will be cast out from our tribe. Choose now." One by one, the warriors lowered their weapons. Most looked relieved they'd followed Cholena out of loyalty, not conviction. "Father," Cholena began, "you are still my son, but you must learn that wanting something does not make it yours." Karuk looked tired and old suddenly. "Come home. Find honor in other ways than taking what is not offered." For a moment, violence still hung in the air like smoke before a fire. Then Chelina wheeled his horse around and rode off, most of the warriors following. A few lingered, and one young warrior even dismounted. "Chief Nalish," the young man said, "I would trade here if permitted. I'm tired of waiting for wars that don't come." "All peaceful traders are welcome," Nalish replied. Then looked at Ezekiel and Ayanna. "Now, about this marriage." The ceremony happened 3 days later, a blend of Apache and white traditions that no one had seen before. Ayanna wore her grandmother's wedding dress, modified for her height, while Ezekiel wore his father's suit, carefully preserved through years of poverty. Captain Reynolds served as official witness for the territorial government, ensuring the marriage was legal by white law. Chief Nalish performed the Apache rituals, binding their hands with a cord woven from both white cotton and Apache sinew. "This is not just a marriage," Nalish said to the gathered crowd, Apache, white, Mexican, all mingled together. "This is a bridge. What these two join, let no one tear apart." Tom Martinez was Ezekiel's best man, while Itel stood for her sister. The younger woman had tears in her eyes as she watched Ayanna find the happiness that had seemed impossible for someone of her size and strength. "You sure about this?" Tom whispered to Ezekiel as they waited for Ayanna to approach. "It won't be easy, the two of you. Some folks will never accept it." "Nothing worth doing is easy," Ezekiel replied. Then lost all further words as Ayanna appeared. She'd always been impressive, but joy transformed her into something magnificent. She moved with grace, despite her size. Her eyes locked on Ezekiel's with a mixture of love and wonder, as if she couldn't quite believe this was happening. The vows were simple, spoken in both languages. Ezekiel promised to protect, provide, and cherish. Ayanna promised to support, defend, and love. When they kissed, sealing the union, the crowd erupted in celebration, not universal. Some still looked uncomfortable, but enough to show that change was possible. The celebration lasted well into the night. Apache drums mixed with white fiddle music. Traditional dances gave way to invented ones that borrowed from both cultures. Even Kurik, who'd returned for the ceremony, seemed to soften as he watched the genuine joy around him. "Your daughter has chosen strangely," he said to Nalish, "but perhaps wisely. Time will tell. But look," Nalish gestured to where white and Apache children played together, their parents talking over shared food. "This is what we fight for now. Not conquest, but connection." Late in the evening, Ezekiel found a moment alone with his new wife. They stood apart from the celebration, looking out over the valley that had become their shared home. "Regrets?" Ayanna asked softly. "About marrying the most magnificent woman I've ever met? None." She laughed, the sound rich and warm. "I am too tall, too strong, too Apache for a white man. And I'm too white, too weak, too different for an Apache woman. Together, we're perfectly imperfect." She leaned against him carefully, given their height difference. "Chelina will not give up. Neither will men like Cain. They'll keep trying to destroy what we're building. Then we'll keep building it stronger." He took her hand, marveling at how it dwarfed his own, yet fit perfectly. "Your father was right, this is bigger than us. But it starts with us. The trading post. More than that. Children who will grow up belonging to both worlds. Stories that blend our traditions. A future where different doesn't mean enemy. You dream large, husband. I learned from my wife. She dreams of preserving stories. I dream of living new ones." They were interrupted by Itel approaching with a wrapped gift. "From grandmother," she said, offering it to Ayanna. She could not travel, but she sent this. Inside was a blanket woven with a pattern neither fully Apache nor fully white, a new design that somehow honored both traditions while creating something unique. "She says it's for your first child," Itel explained, then grinned mischievously. "She expects many grandchildren tall as mountains and clever as coyotes." Ayanna blushed, a remarkable sight on someone so usually composed. Ezekiel laughed, wrapping an arm around his wife's waist. "We'll do our best to not disappoint her." The next morning brought its own challenges. A delegation from town arrived, led by the banker Harold Morrison. James accompanied his father, looking apologetic. "This is an abomination," the elder Morrison declared without preamble. "A white man taking a savage wife." "Careful," Captain Reynolds interrupted. He'd stayed for the wedding and hadn't left yet. "You're speaking about the legal wife of a territorial citizen. The marriage is properly recorded and recognized. It's unnatural. So was this trading post? Ezekiel said calmly. You fought that too until it started making you money. Morrison's face reddened. This is different. This is about blood, about race. This is about fear, Ayanna said, her deep voice cutting through his bluster. You fear what you don't understand, but look around you. She gestured to the busy trading post where business continued despite the confrontation. Apache and White work together here. They prosper together. Their children play together. This is the future, Mr. Morrison, whether you like it or not. We'll see about that. There are laws. No law prohibits interracial marriage in this territory, James said quietly. I checked. Thoroughly. His father turned on him in shock. You knew about this. I knew two people were falling in love despite every reason not to. I knew they were building something that could transform this territory from a battlefield into a community. James stood straighter. And I knew that history would judge us by whether we helped or hindered them. You're a fool, boy. Perhaps, but I'm a fool on the right side of progress. Morrison stormed off, but the damage was done. Word spread quickly through the territory the trading postman had married an Apache giant. Some saw it as scandal, others as hope, most as confirmation that the world was changing, whether they were ready or not. That evening, Marshal Kane himself arrived, but not with a posse or threats alone, looking older and defeated. Brooks confessed, he said without greeting. Named me as the one who ordered the false raids. We know, Ezekiel replied. Judge Carter has removed me from office. I'm finished as a lawman. Kane looked around the trading post with something like wonder. This place destroyed me. No, Ayanna said. Your hatred destroyed you. This place just revealed it. Kane studied her for a long moment. You really love him. This isn't some Apache trick. The only trick is believing love needs permission from those who would deny it. And you, Kane asked Ezekiel, you really choose this over your own kind. I choose to believe we're all the same kind human. The rest is just details we've let divide us for too long. Kane shook his head slowly. You're either the wisest man I've ever met or the biggest fool. Probably both, Ezekiel admitted. As Kane rode away a broken man heading for whatever life awaited him elsewhere, Ezekiel felt a chapter closing. The old barriers were falling, not without resistance, but falling nonetheless. That night in the cabin that had been his father's and was now theirs, Ezekiel and Ayanna lay together as husband and wife. The bed built for normal-sized people was comically inadequate for Ayanna's height, leading to creative positioning and much laughter. We need a bigger bed, Ezekiel said, stroking her long black hair. We need a bigger house, she countered. This cabin is too small for the family we'll build. Already planning our empire, planning our future. She grew serious. Ezekiel, what we've done marrying across the divide, it will inspire some and enrage others. There will be violence. I know. There will be times when both sides hate us. I know. Our children will belong to neither world fully. No, he corrected gently. They'll belong to both worlds completely. That's the difference. They won't be caught between, they'll be the bridge. She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, I love you. I didn't expect to, didn't plan to, but I do. I love you too. Probably from the moment you asked me to save your sister and I saw the strength it took for you to show vulnerability. That seems like a lifetime ago. It was. We're different people now than we were that night. A commotion outside interrupted them, shouts, but not of alarm. They dressed quickly and emerged to find an unexpected sight, a wagon train of Apache families loaded with goods and children arriving at the trading post. Leading them was an elderly woman bent with age, but with eyes that missed nothing. She dismounted from her horse with surprising agility and approached Nalish. Mother, the chief said with deep respect. This was Nalish's mother, Ayanna, and Atel's grandmother, the one who'd sent the wedding blanket. She surveyed the trading post with sharp intelligence, then looked at Ezekiel and Ayanna. So, she said in accented but clear English, you are the white man who thinks himself worthy of my granddaughter. Ezekiel didn't flinch. I don't think myself worthy. I just try to be worthy. Good answer. She approached Ayana, reaching up to touch her face despite the height difference. "You are happy, child." "Yes, grandmother." "Then I approve." She turned to address the gathered crowd. "I have brought families who wish to settle here to be part of this new way. They will build, trade, learn. Any who object can argue with me." No one argued with her. Over the following weeks, the trading post evolved into something more a true settlement. Apache families built traditional structures alongside white-style buildings. A school was established where children learned both languages, both histories. The forge rang with the sound of Apache and white smiths working together, sharing techniques. But it was the unexpected moments that showed real change. Like when Mrs. Patterson's daughter fell ill and an Apache medicine woman worked alongside the white doctor to save her. Or when Apache warriors and white ranchers rode together to fight a wildfire that threatened everyone's land. Or when Kalena returned not with violence, but with a request to trade, having finally accepted that the old ways of taking by force were ending. "I still think you won by trickery," he told Ezekiel at the trading post. "I won by thinking differently. Maybe it's time you tried that too." Kalena looked around at the thriving settlement. "Perhaps. My father says I should learn from this place. Everyone's welcome who comes in peace. Even former enemies. Especially former enemies. They have the most to gain from becoming friends." 3 months after the marriage, Ayana made an announcement that set the settlement buzzing with excitement. She was pregnant. The child would be the first mixed blood born in the new community, a living symbol of the bridge they were building. "What if the child is tall like me?" Ayana worried privately to Ezekiel. "Then they'll stand out like their mother. What if they're rejected by both sides? Then we'll teach them that rejection says more about the rejecter than the rejected." He placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "This child will be loved, Ayana. By us, by your family, by this community we're building. That's all that matters." But even as they celebrated new life, old threats lingered. Harold Morrison hadn't given up his opposition, and he'd found allies among those who saw the mixing of races as a threat to the established order. Letters arrived warning of federal investigations of new laws being proposed to prevent such settlements. "They're scared," James Morrison said during one of his visits. He'd become a regular supporter, often bringing news from the territorial capital. "The trading post is succeeding beyond anyone's dreams. Other locations want to copy the model. That terrifies people who profit from division." "What can they actually do?" Ezekiel asked. "Legally. Very little. The treaties protect you, the territory has licensed the trading post, and your marriage is recognized. But," James hesitated, "there are rumors of federal troops being reassigned to this area, officers who believe in strict separation of races." "Let them come," Ayana said firmly. "We've faced everything else." But when the troops did come, they brought an unexpected Commander General William Sherman himself on an inspection tour of Western territories. His arrival sent waves of panic through the settlement. Sherman's reputation with Native Americans was harsh at best. The general arrived with a full regiment setting up camp just outside the settlement. He demanded really a meeting with all the leadership. They gathered in the main trading hall, Ezekiel and Ayana. Chief Nalish, who'd come when he heard of Sherman's arrival, Captain Reynolds, James Morrison, and several other key figures from both communities. Sherman was exactly as his reputation suggested: sharp, direct, and intimidating. He surveyed the room with eyes that had seen too much war lingering on Ayana, with obvious surprise at her size, then on her pregnant condition and her white husband. "I've received numerous complaints about this place," he began without preamble. "Mixing of races, Apache conducting business as equals with whites, and," he gestured to Ezekiel and Ayana, "whatever this is." "This is a legal marriage and a licensed trading post," Captain Reynolds said firmly. "I'm not questioning legality, Captain. I'm questioning wisdom." Sherman stood pacing the room. "I've fought Apache. I've fought Comanche Sioux Cheyenne. I know what mixing populations leads to violence, confusion, weakness. With respect, General Chief Nalish said, "You know what forcing separation leads to. This is an attempt at something different." "Different?" Sherman almost smiled. "That's one word for it." He stopped in front of Ezekiel. "You're the one who started this. I just saved some people in a storm. Everything else followed from that. Don't be modest.
You married the chief's daughter, turned your ranch into this experiment. You've either got vision or you're insane. Probably both, sir. This time Sherman did smile briefly. You remind me of someone I knew in the war. Thought he could change the world through sheer stubborn will. He died, of course. We all died, General. Question is what we build while we're alive. Sherman studied him for a long moment, then turned to Ayanna. And you, ma'am? What do you say about all this? Ayanna stood her height, requiring Sherman to look up.
I say that my child will be born into a world where Apache and white work together instead of killing each other. That seems worth any risk. Your child will be neither Apache nor white. Our child will be both, and proud of it. Sherman was quiet for a long moment, the room tense with anticipation. Then he said something unexpected. Show me this place, not the official tour. Show me how it really works. They spent the entire day walking Sherman through the settlement. He saw the school where children learned together, the forge where techniques were shared, the fields where Apache and white farmers compared irrigation methods, the clinic where traditional and modern medicine combined. But it was a small moment that seemed to affect him most. A white toddler had wandered away from his mother and fallen scraping his knee. An Apache grandmother scooped him up, comforting him in a mix of Apache and English, cleaning the wound with practiced care. The child's mother arrived panicked, then relieved, thanking the Apache woman with genuine gratitude. That, Sherman said quietly to Ezekiel, that's not something you can force or fake. That evening, Sherman made his decision public. This settlement operates under treaty protection and territorial law. The federal government will not interfere. He paused, looking directly at Harold Morrison, who'd arrived hoping to see the settlement shut down. Moreover, I'm recommending this model be studied for potential expansion. If Apache and whites can trade instead of raid, everyone benefits. General, you can't be serious, Morrison protested. I'm always serious, Mr. Morrison. I've seen enough blood spilled over racial hatred. If these people have found another way, who am I to stop them? He turned to leave, then paused. But understand this, I'll be watching. One significant incident, one breach of peace from either side, and I'll shut this down myself. After Sherman left, the settlement erupted in celebration. They'd passed the highest test, gained the most unlikely ally. But Ezekiel found himself oddly subdued, standing apart with Ayanna. You're worried, she observed. Sherman's approval is a double-edged sword. Now we're not just a local experiment, we're a model. The pressure to succeed just multiplied. Then we multiply our efforts to match. She took his hand, placing it on her growing belly. This child, our child, will grow up in the world we're building. That's worth any pressure. That night, as they lay in their new, larger bed, in their new, larger house, both built by Apache and white hands working together, Ezekiel reflected on the journey. From a failing rancher ready to lose everything to the center of something that might change the frontier forever. What are you thinking? Ayanna asked, sensing his wakefulness. About your father's words when he first made his offer. He said much can change in 3 weeks. He was wrong. Oh, everything can change in 3 weeks, or in a single storm, a single choice, a single act of kindness that ripples outward like drops in still water. And what ripples are we making now? He turned to face her, seeing in the moonlight the woman who'd challenged everything he thought he knew about the world. We're making waves, my love, waves that will crash against old walls until they crumble. That sounds like war. No, it sounds like change, and change, real change, is always revolutionary. She kissed him then deeply and passionately, and for a while they forgot about revolutions and focused on the simple, profound revolution of two people from different worlds choosing to love each other completely. Outside the settlement slept peacefully Apache and white side by side, dreaming of a future that once seemed impossible but now felt inevitable. The trading post had become more than a place of commerce. It had become a beacon of possibility, a proof that enemies could become family, that difference could be strength, that love could indeed conquer fear. But every beacon attracts both ships seeking safe harbor and those who would extinguish the light. The real tests were still to come. The first real test came 6 months later on a cold November morning when Ayanna was heavy with child. Ezekiel woke to the sound of horses too many and moving too fast for traders. He reached for his rifle, but Ayana's hand stopped him. "Listen," she whispered. "Those are Apache horses, but not our people." Through the window, they saw riders circling the settlement, their war paint different from the local tribes. At their head rode a man whose presence commanded immediate attention, tall, scarred, with eyes that burned with barely contained rage. "Victorio," Ayana breathed, "the war chief." Ezekiel knew the name. Victorio had refused all treaties, continuing to raid and fight, while other Apache leaders sought peace. His arrival here meant trouble of the worst kind. Chief Nalish emerged from his dwelling fully dressed despite the early hour. He'd been expecting this, Ezekiel realized. The old chief walked calmly to meet Victorio, who dismounted with the fluid grace of a lifelong warrior. "Brother Nalish," Victorio said in Apache, his voice carrying across the settlement, "I have come to see this abomination you have created." "You have come to see the future," Nalish replied evenly. "I see Apache living like dogs beside their masters. I see our daughters breeding with whites. I see the end of our people." By now the entire settlement was awake. White families clustered nervously near their homes, while Apache warriors positioned themselves carefully, not threatening but ready. Captain Reynolds, who'd taken to staying at the settlement regularly, appeared with several soldiers but wisely held back. "You see survival," Nalish said. "You see adaptation. I see cowardice." Victorio's gaze found Ezekiel and Ayana, who'd emerged from their house. "And I see the worst of it there. An Apache woman descended from warriors swollen with a white man's child." Ayana stepped forward despite Ezekiel's attempt to hold her back. Even pregnant, she moved with dignity and power. "I carry the future, Uncle Victorio. A child who will know both worlds and be stronger for it." "You carry pollution," Victorio spat. "Your child will be nothing, not Apache, not white, belonging nowhere." "Like you." Ayana's words cut sharp. "You who cannot accept change, who clings to war when peace is possible, who belongs more to the past than the present." Victorio's hand went to his knife, but Nalish stepped between them. "There will be no violence here. This is neutral ground." "Neutral?" Victorio laughed bitterly. "There is no neutral in war." "We are not at war," Ezekiel said, finding his voice. "Not anymore." Victorio turned his burning gaze on him. "You, the white man who thinks he can own Apache women like cattle." "I don't own anyone. I married someone. There's a difference." "You corrupted her, turned her against her people." "Her people are here," Ezekiel gestured to the settlement. "Apache and white living together, thriving together. Living as slaves. Look around you." Tom Martinez had joined them along with other white ranchers. "Do we look like masters? We work alongside each other. We learn from each other." "You exploit each other," Victorio countered. "The Apache lose their way, the whites gain wealth." "Everyone gains," Kuruk's voice surprised everyone. The neighboring chief had arrived during the night, somehow knowing trouble was coming. "My people trade here. We prosper without raiding. Our children grow without fear of soldiers." "They grow soft," Victorio sneered. "Like you, Kuruk. Once you were a warrior, now you're a merchant." "Now I'm a father who doesn't have to watch his children starve or die in meaningless battles," Kuruk replied firmly. "That is not weakness, that is wisdom." Victorio looked around at the gathered crowd, Apache and white, standing together, united in their opposition to his way of thinking. "You are all fools. The whites will betray you. They always do. When they have what they want, when they feel strong enough, they will destroy you all." Some might. James Morrison had arrived from town having heard of Victorio's presence. Just as some Apache might raid and kill, but not these whites and not these Apache. We're building something different. "Building your own destruction." Victorio remounted his horse. "When this place burns, and it will burn, remember that I warned you. The Apache who stand with whites will fall with them." He started to ride away, then turned back to Ayana. "When your mongrel child is born, rejected by both peoples, remember that you chose this shame." Ayana's response was to take Ezekiel's hand and place it on her belly. "When my child is born, celebrated by both peoples, I'll remember that you couldn't see the future even when it stood before you." Victorio and his warriors rode off, but the tension remained. Everyone knew this wasn't over. Victorio didn't make idle threats. "He'll be back," Nalish said quietly to Ezekiel, "with more warriors with violence. Then we'll be ready." "Will we? Can your white friends fight Apache warriors? Can my people fight their own brothers?" It was a question that haunted the next weeks. The settlement prepared as best it could. Fortifications were strengthened. Watches were doubled. Plans were made. But how do you prepare to fight an enemy who knows all your weaknesses because they were once your family? The answer came from an unexpected source. Helena arrived one evening alone, riding hard. "Victorio gathers warriors," he reported without preamble. "Not just his own band, he calls on all who oppose the peace. They plan to attack in 3 days during the new moon." "Why tell us?" Ezekiel asked, suspicious of this former enemy's help. "Because my father is right. The old ways are ending. I can either help shape the new ways or be crushed by them." Helena looked uncomfortable. "And because I've been trading here. This place, it works. I don't want to see it destroyed." "How many warriors?" Nalish asked. "Maybe 60, perhaps more." The math was grim. The settlement had maybe 30 men who could fight half Apache, half white. Against 60 experienced Apache warriors, it would be a massacre. "We need help," Captain Reynolds said. "I can send for reinforcements." "Army involvement would prove Victorio right," Nalish interrupted. "It would become whites against Apache exactly what he wants." "Then what do we do?" Tom Martinez asked. It was Ayanna who answered, her voice calm despite the danger to everything they'd built. "We show them another way. Victorio expects a fight. What if we don't give him one? He'll attack anyway," Kalina said. "Will he attack women and children? Attack unarmed people?" "That's not the Apache way, not even Victorio's way." "You're suggesting we just not fight?" Reynolds asked incredulously. "I'm suggesting we make fighting impossible without becoming the monsters Victorio claims we already are." The plan that emerged was audacious in its simplicity. When Victorio attacked, there would be no warriors to fight. Instead, he would find families, Apache and white, standing together unarmed, protecting their children and each other with their bodies not weapons. "It's insane," Reynolds said. "It's brilliant," Karuk countered. "Victorio wants a battle to prove his way is right. Deny him battle and his way becomes meaningless." "He might attack anyway, so," Ezekiel pointed out. "He might," Ayanna agreed. "But I don't think he will. Victorio is many things, but he's not a murderer of innocents. And if he becomes one, he loses everything, honor, support, even his own warriors' loyalty." The 3 days passed too quickly. On the appointed night, as darkness fell without moon to light it, the settlement prepared. But not for battle for witness. Families gathered in the center of the settlement. Apache and white intermingled children held between them. No one bore weapons. Instead, they held lanterns, creating a circle of light in the darkness. Ezekiel stood with Ayanna, her pregnancy making her even more prominent. Around them, their extended family, Nalish Ayanna, along with the Martinez family, the Hendersons, and dozens of others who'd become part of this grand experiment. They heard the warriors before they saw them, horse hooves, thundering war cries, splitting the night. Victorio's force swept into the settlement, expecting resistance, expecting battle. Instead, they found the circle of light families standing together. Children singing a song that Ayanna had taught them, an old Apache lullaby about peace after storm. The warriors pulled up short horses, rearing in confusion. Victorio rode forward, his face a mask of rage and bewilderment. "What is this?" he demanded. "This is who we are," Nalish replied simply. "Families, Apache and white. Not fighting, just living." "Arm yourselves," Victorio shouted. "Fight me." "No," Ezekiel said quietly. "We won't give you the war you want. Then you'll die as cowards." "Look at us," Ayanna said, her voice carrying despite its calm. "Look at these children, Apache children held by white parents, white children protected by Apache warriors. Is this what you came to destroy?" Some of Victorio's warriors were already lowering their weapons, uncertainty replacing bloodlust. One young warrior dismounted entirely. I cannot do this, he said. I came to fight enemies, not murder families. Get back on your horse, Victorio commanded, but more warriors were hesitating now. Then something extraordinary happened. Old Grandmother Nalish's mother walked through the circle of families directly toward Victorio. She was tiny, ancient, but she moved with authority that made warriors twice her size step aside. Little Victory, she said, using what must have been a childhood name. I knew your mother. She would weep to see what you've become. I became a warrior, a defender of our people. You became a fool who cannot see when the war is over. She reached up and amazingly Victorio leaned down to let her touch his face. The world has changed, child. You can change with it or be left behind, but you cannot stop it. They destroy us, Victorio said, and for the first time pain replaced rage in his voice. No, fear destroys us. Hatred destroys us. This, she gestured to the settlement, this builds us into something new, something that might survive when the old ways cannot. It's wrong. Mixing blood, mixing cultures. It's evolution, a new voice said. General Sherman rode into the light accompanied by a small detachment. He'd arrived that afternoon having heard of the impending attack. And you're interfering with it. More soldiers, Victorio said bitterly. So the whites do command here. I command nothing here, Sherman said. I'm simply observing, but what I observe is remarkable Apache and whites choosing peace over war cooperation over conflict. And you, Chief Victorio, about to make a decision that will define whether you're remembered as a warrior or a butcher. The standoff stretched taut. Victorio's warriors waited for his command, but many were clearly reluctant. The families in the circle continued to stand together, children still singing softly, the lullaby, a thread of hope in the darkness. Then Ayanna gasped her hand, going to her belly. The baby, she said to Ezekiel. It's coming. The timing couldn't have been worse, or perhaps better. The circle of families immediately responded, Apache and white women moving to help. They created a protective huddle around Ayanna, who was helped to the ground, Ezekiel beside her. We need the healer, someone called, and both the Apache medicine woman and the white doctor appeared working together without hesitation. Victorio watched in disbelief as his planned battle turned into a birthing. Some of his warriors actually dismounted, drawn by the universal human response to new life arriving. This is ridiculous, Victorio said, but his voice had lost its edge. This is life, Grandmother corrected. Life going on despite your war because of their peace. The labor was quick. Perhaps the child was eager to enter this strange contested world. As Ayanna struggled and pushed, the settlement held its breath. Apache and white warrior and farmer, all united in waiting for a child who would embody their experiment's hope. When the baby's cry pierced the night, strong, healthy, alive, a cheer went up from the crowd. Even some of Victorio's warriors smiled despite themselves. It's a girl, the doctor announced, and the Apache medicine woman added, a strong girl, a bridge girl. Ezekiel held his daughter for the first time, tears streaming down his face. She was perfect, darker than him, lighter than her mother, with Ayanna's strong features and what might be his green eyes, a child of two worlds belonging to both. What will you name her? Nalish asked, his own eyes suspiciously moist. Ezekiel looked at Ayanna, who nodded. They'd discussed this, planned for it. Hope, Ezekiel said. In English, hope. In Apache, Gojuo, because that's what she is. Victorio had ridden closer, drawn despite himself. He looked down at the child, this mixing of blood he'd come to prevent, and something shifted in his face. She will suffer, he said quietly, between worlds accepted by neither. Or she'll be accepted by both, Ayanna said, exhausted but fierce. She'll make her own world one where such divisions don't matter. You're naive. You're afraid, Ayanna countered. Afraid that we might be right, that peace might work, that everything you fought for might be unnecessary. Victorio was silent for a long moment, his warriors waiting. Then he did something no one expected. He dismounted and approached on foot. The crowd tensed, but he held his hands visible and empty. He knelt beside the newborn, studying her tiny face. She has warrior's eyes, he said finally, but perhaps she will be a different kind of warrior. A warrior for peace, Grandmother said. The hardest kind to be. Victorio stood slowly. I do not accept this path. I will never accept whites as brothers. He looked at his warriors. But I will not spill blood here. Not tonight. Not with new life present. He walked back to his horse mounted and looked one last time at the settlement. You build something strange here, Nalish. I pray you do not live to regret it. And I pray you live to see its wisdom, Nalish replied. Victorio rode away, most of his warriors following, but not all. Several remained dismounted, drawn by curiosity or perhaps by hope. May we stay, Chai? One young warrior asked. To understand Apo, all are welcome who come in peace, Nalish said. As dawn broke, the settlement had survived its greatest test without firing a shot. The baby Hope Gozhuo was passed from arms to arms, Apache and white alike, blessing her, welcoming her to a world that her very existence was helping to create. She's beautiful, Tom Martinez said, holding the baby carefully. Going to be tall like her mama. And hopefully smarter than her father, Ezekiel added, exhausted but happy. General Sherman, who'd watched everything with his usual intense expression, approached. That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. Which do you think, General? Ayanna asked from where she rested. Both. Definitely both. He looked at the baby. May I? Surprisingly gentle, the feared general held the newborn, his weathered face softening. Hello, little bridge, he said quietly. You've got a hard road ahead, but something tells me you're up for it. Over the following days, word spread about the night Victorio came to destroy and left without violence, about the child born in the midst of potential battle, about the settlement that chose unity over division, even when threatened with death. More families came, both Apache and white, drawn by the story, by the hope it represented. The trading post expanded again, becoming less a business and more a town. The first truly integrated town in the territory. But success brought new challenges. A delegation from Washington arrived, bureaucrats with rules and regulations trying to fit this unprecedented situation into their narrow categories. The Apache must live on the reservation. The lead official, a pinched man named Garrett, insisted. It's federal law. They do live on the reservation, James Morrison argued. He'd become the settlement's unofficial legal advocate. The reservation boundary extends to include this area. That's a technicality. That's the law. Unless you're saying federal law doesn't matter when it's inconvenient. Garrett turned to the white families. And you're comfortable living among savages. We're comfortable living among neighbors, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. She'd become one of the strongest advocates for integration. Her initial fear transformed into fierce protectiveness. And if you use that word again, you'll find out how savage a white woman can be. The federal delegation spent 3 days investigating, interviewing, trying to find violations or reasons to shut down the settlement. They found none. The books were clean, the trades were legal, the marriage between Ezekiel and Ayanna was properly recorded. This is unnatural, Garrett said in a final meeting with the leadership. So was democracy once, Captain Reynolds pointed out. So was abolition. So was every good change humanity ever made. You're comparing this experiment to democracy. I'm comparing courage to change with cowardice to stay the same, Reynolds said bluntly. Garrett left in frustration, but his report would create ripples. The settlement was now known in Washington for better or worse. That night, as Ezekiel and Ayanna lay with their daughter between them, they talked about the future. She'll need education, Ayanna said. Both kinds. Apache traditions and white schooling. She'll need strength, Ezekiel added, to face those who'll hate her for what she represents. She'll have it. Look at her parents, a giant Apache woman and a stubborn white rancher. She's got strength in her blood. The baby gurgled as if agreeing, and they both laughed. What do you think she'll become? Ezekiel asked. Whatever she wants. That's the point, isn't it? To give her choices we never had. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Etel, looking concerned. Riders approaching, not hostile, but strange. They went to sea, finding a group unlike any that had visited before. Chinese workers from the railroad camps, Mexican traders from the south, even a group of freed slaves from Texas. They'd all heard about the settlement where different peoples traded freely, lived peacefully. We seek a place, their spokesman, a elderly Chinese man, said carefully in broken English. Place where different is not wrong. Ezekiel looked at Ayanna, who nodded. Then you've found it, he said. Welcome to the trading post. As these new arrivals set up camp, the settlement's reality struck Ezekiel fully. They weren't just bridging Apache and white anymore. They were creating something unprecedented, a truly mixed community where origin mattered less than intention, where cooperation outweighed competition. It's growing beyond what we imagined, he said to Chief Nalish. All good things do, Mbeta, the chief replied. A seed doesn't know it will become a tree, but it grows anyway. What if we can't control it? Then we guide it like water finding its path. Control is illusion, adaptation is survival. That winter was hard. Food ran short with so many new arrivals, and tensions rose. Some Apache resented the dilution of their influence. Some whites feared being outnumbered. The new arrivals struggled to find their place. It was Hope who, in her innocent baby way, helped ease tensions. Passed from family to family during communal meals, she was cared for by Chinese grandmothers, Mexican mothers, Apache, aunts, white neighbors. She became everyone's child, a living reminder of why they were trying to build something together. She's going to be spoiled, Ezekiel complained good-naturedly as yet another family brought gifts for the baby. She's going to be loved, Ayanna corrected, by an entire community. How many children can say that? The spring brought new challenges and opportunities. A teacher arrived from the east, a young woman named Sarah Chen herself, mixed race Chinese and Irish, who'd heard about the settlement and wanted to help build its school. I know what it's like to belong nowhere, she said simply. I want to help create a somewhere for children like I was. The school she helped establish was revolutionary. Lessons in multiple languages, history from multiple perspectives, mathematics taught through Apache patterns and Western equations. Children learning not just facts, but how to think, how to question, how to bridge differences. Victorio returned once alone to see what had become of the settlement. He found Ezekiel teaching Apache children to read English, while Ayanna taught white children Apache stories. You persist in this madness, he observed. We persist in this hope, Ezekiel corrected. And when the government changes, when the treaties are broken, when the whites decide they want everything, then we'll face that together, all of us stronger for our unity than we ever were in our division. Victorio watched Hope now crawling, playing with children of every color, all of them oblivious to the differences that defined their parents' worlds. Perhaps, he said quietly, perhaps there is something to this after all. He left without violence, without threats. Some said he even smiled as he rode away, though others insisted that was impossible. By Hope's first birthday, the settlement had become a town in truth. The Apache Crossing, they called it, though everyone still referred to it simply as the trading post. It had a main street with shops run by Apache, white, Mexican, Chinese, and black families. It had a courthouse where justice was dispensed by a council representing all communities. It had a newspaper that printed in 3 languages. The birthday celebration for Hope was the town's first official festival. Apache drums and Chinese firecrackers, Mexican guitars and Irish fiddles, African rhythms and American harmonies, all blending into something new, something unprecedented. Look what you started, Tom Martinez said to Ezekiel as they watched the celebration. All because you couldn't leave 2 women in a storm. All because those women were worth saving, Ezekiel corrected. All because their father was wise enough to see opportunity in crisis. All because love is stronger than fear, Ayanna added, joining them with Hope in her arms. The child reached for her father, babbling in what might have been Apache, or English, or simply baby talk that transcended language. As Ezekiel held his daughter looking out at the impossible town they'd helped create, he thought about the future she would inherit. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, those who would try to destroy what they'd built. But there would also be this proof that different peoples could live together, work together, thrive together. Proof that children could grow up seeing difference as strength, not threat. What are you thinking? Ayanna asked, leaning against him carefully, still mindful of their height difference. I'm thinking about the man I was 2 years ago, alone and failing, ready to give up. And I'm thinking about the man I am now, with a family and a purpose and a future worth fighting for. And which do you prefer? He looked at her, at their daughter, at the celebrating town around them. This, always this, even with all its complications and dangers. Good, she said, because I have something to tell you. She placed his hand on her belly. Hope is going to have a sibling. The joy that flooded through him was matched by terror. Another child, another bridge between worlds, another soul who would have to navigate the complicated reality they'd created. Scared? Ayana asked, reading his expression. Terrified, Bush, he admitted. But also excited to see what new impossible thing we'll create together. As night fell on the trading post on Apache Crossing, the celebration continued. Lanterns lit the streets where Apache and White and all others walked freely. Music filled the air, a dozen traditions blending into something new. Children played together unconscious of the boundaries their parents had broken. And in the center of it all, a family that shouldn't exist by all the old rules, a white rancher, an Apache giant, and their daughter who belonged to all worlds, stood as proof that the impossible was only impossible until someone was brave enough to make it real. The trading post had become more than a place of commerce. It had become a promise, a glimpse of what America could be when fear gave way to hope, when difference was celebrated rather than suppressed, when love was stronger than the forces trying to divide. The promise would be tested sooner than anyone expected. 6 months after Hope's first birthday, as Ayana grew heavy with their second child, a letter arrived that changed everything. It bore the seal of the federal government and was addressed to Ezekiel personally. By order of the Commission on Indian Affairs, he read aloud to the gathered council, all Apache residing outside designated reservation boundaries must relocate within 30 days. No exceptions will be granted. The silence that followed was deafening. Chief Nalish took the letter, reading it himself as if hoping the words might change. But we are within reservation boundaries, James Morrison protested. We established that legally. They've redrawn them, Ezekiel said quietly, showing them the attached map. The new boundaries excluded the trading post entirely, cutting it off from Apache territory by a mere 2 miles. That might as well have been an ocean. They can't do this, Captain Reynolds said, though his military experience told him otherwise. They can and they have, Nalish said, his voice heavy with the weight of too many broken treaties. This is how it always ends. They give, then they take. They promise, then they betray. Not this time, Ezekiel said firmly. We've built something here that transcends their maps and boundaries. Pretty words won't stop federal troops, Kuruk observed. He'd arrived that morning on other business, but now faced the same crisis. And they will send troops. Then we fight, Kolena suggested. He'd become a regular at the trading post, his former hostility transformed into protective loyalty. Fighting proves we're the savages they claim we are, Ayana said, from where she sat, one hand protectively over her belly. We need another way. What other way exists? An elderly Apache man asked. We leave or we die. This has always been the choice they give us. It was Hope who provided an unexpected solution, though she didn't know it. The toddler had escaped her minders and wandered into the council meeting, heading straight for her grandfather, Nalish. But halfway there, she tripped and fell. Immediately, 3 people moved to help her, Tom Martinez, the Chinese shopkeeper, Mr. Wei, and Cholena. They reached her simultaneously, all 3 lifting her together, their concern for the child overriding any awareness of their differences. There, Ezekiel said suddenly. That's our answer. Everyone looked at him in confusion. They can force Apache to move, but can they force all of us? Mr. Wei, are you Apache? No, I am Chinese. Tom, are you Apache? You know I'm not Ezekiel. Yet you both live here, work here, have families here. The order says Apache must relocate. It says nothing about anyone else. Ezekiel stood, energy building in his voice. What if those who aren't Apache refuse to leave? What if we maintain the trading post, keep it running, and simply wait for our Apache families to return? Return from where? Nalish asked. From visiting the reservation, a temporary visit to comply with the letter of the law while we fight its spirit. James Morrison's eyes lit up with understanding. It's brilliant. The Apache relocate officially but maintain property and business interests here through proxies and partnerships. The government can't force non-Apache to abandon legally held property. But who would stay? Kuruk asked.
Who would risk federal wrath for Apache they've known only a short time? The answer came in a chorus of voices. I will, said Tom Martinez. My family stays, declared Mrs. Patterson. We stay. The Chinese families confirmed. One by one, every non-Apache family in the trading post pledged to remain. You would do this? Nalish asked, clearly moved.
Risk everything for us. You're not us anymore, Sarah Chen, the teacher, said firmly. You're family, all of you. We don't abandon family. The plan that emerged over the following days was complex but workable. The Apache would officially relocate to the reservation, satisfying federal requirements, but their businesses, homes, and property would be held in trust by non-Apache partners. A continuous rotation would ensure Apache were always visiting the trading post for trade purposes, which was still legal. It's a shell game, Reynolds admitted. If they look too closely, it falls apart. Then we make sure they don't look too closely, James said. I'll file so much paperwork, create so many legal challenges that by the time they sort through it all, we'll have found a permanent solution. The first test came 2 weeks later when Federal Marshal Jensen arrived with a squad of soldiers to oversee the relocation. He was nothing like Kane, cold, efficient, and completely unmoved by emotional appeals. All Apache will be documented and relocated, he announced. Any found here after the deadline will be arrested. What about mixed families? Ezekiel asked. My wife is Apache, but I'm white. Our daughter is both. Jensen consulted his papers. Mixed blood children may remain with their non-Apache parent. Full-blood Apache spouses must relocate. The cruelty of it was breathtaking, forcing families apart based on blood quantum, but it also revealed a weakness in their plan. Then, I guess we need more marriages, Ezekiel said quietly to Ayanna that night. She looked at him sharply. You're not suggesting, not real marriages, paper marriages, legal protections. He'd been thinking about this since Jensen's pronouncement. Every unmarried Apache woman could marry a white or Mexican or Chinese man on paper. Every Apache man could do the same with non-Apache women. Marriages of convenience to prevent separation. The government would see through it immediately. Would they, or would they see what they expect frontier marriages born of necessity happened all the time in mining camps and railroad towns? The idea spread through the community like wildfire. Within 3 days, 22 marriages of convenience were performed by Judge Hobbs, an old circuit judge who'd settled in the trading post and didn't ask too many questions. Etel's marriage was the most surprising. She chose to marry not any of the young men who'd courted her, but Mr. Wei, the 60-year-old Chinese widower. It's perfect, she explained to her shocked sister. He needs someone to help with his grandchildren since his daughter died. I need legal protection. We're friends, we respect each other, and there's no danger of complications. Father will be furious, Ayanna warned. Father will understand. This is survival, not romance. Indeed, Nalish said nothing when informed, merely nodding with what might have been approval or resignation. The deadline arrived with federal troops surrounding the trading post. Marshal Jensen stood with his list checking off Apache as they supposedly departed for the reservation. What he didn't see or chose not to see was how many immediately circled back, entering through hidden paths to visit their non-Apache spouses or business partners. This is highly irregular, Jensen said, reviewing the marriage certificates. Love is irregular, Marshal, Sarah Chen replied sweetly, especially on the frontier. 22 marriages in 3 days. There was a romantic moon, Tom Martinez said with a straight face. Made everyone feel matrimonial. Jensen clearly suspected deception, but couldn't prove it. The marriages were legal, the paperwork was in order, and forcing legally married couples apart would create a political nightmare even Washington wouldn't want. I'll be watching, he warned. Any Apache found here without proper authorization will be arrested. We wouldn't dream of violating federal law, James Morrison assured him, his voice dripping with false sincerity. That night, as the community celebrated their small victory, Ezekiel found Victorio in his home. The war chief had somehow slipped past all the federal troops, appearing like a ghost from the shadows. You play dangerous games, white man, Victorio said without preamble. We play the only games available to us. Paper marriages and legal tricks. You think this will save the Apache?
I think it will buy us time to find a real solution. Victorio studied him for a long moment. You've infected them all with your hope. Even warriors like Cholina now speak of cooperation over conflict. Is that so bad? It is if it makes them weak when strength is needed. Victorio moved to the window looking out at the trading post. But I have watched.
Your way has fed more Apache than my raids ever did. Your way has given them dignity and white eyes.
Then help us, Ezekiel said suddenly. Stop fighting us and help us build something better. I cannot. I am too much what I am, a warrior from a dying time. Victorio turned to leave, then paused. But I will not hinder you either. And if federal troops move against women and children here, they will find more resistance than they expect. He vanished into the night, leaving Ezekiel to wonder if he'd just gained an ally or simply a neutral observer. The next months were a delicate dance. Apache families rotated through the trading post in careful shifts, never too many at once, always with legal justification for their presence. Business continued, even thrived as the story of the trading post's resistance spread, drawing curious visitors and sympathetic traders. Hope grew into a curious, fearless toddler who spoke a mixture of Apache, English, Spanish, and Chinese, switching between languages with an ease that amazed adults. Her brother was born during this time, a boy they named Samuel, in English, Bidzil in Apache, meaning he is strong. And he would need to be born into a world where his very existence challenged legal definitions. It was Samuel's birth that brought unexpected help. A photographer from Harper's Weekly arrived wanting to document the curiosity of the mixed settlement, but instead of portraying them as oddities, his photographs captured the humanity. Apache and white children playing together, families of all backgrounds sharing meals, the baby Samuel being blessed by spiritual leaders from 4 different traditions. When the photographs were published, they caused a sensation. Letters of support poured in from across the country. Abolitionists saw parallels to their own struggle. Immigrants saw a place where being different wasn't condemned. Even some congressmen began questioning the wisdom of forcing apart successful, peaceful communities. Public opinion is shifting, James Morrison reported, returning from a trip to Washington. Not enough to change policy yet, but enough to make them cautious. But Marshall Jensen wasn't swayed by public opinion. He returned with disturbing news. The federal government has decided to enforce the Commerce Clause, he announced. All trade between Apache and non-Apache must go through approved government intermediaries. Direct trade is now illegal. It was a devastating blow. Without trade, the settlement would collapse economically. The Apache couldn't sell their goods, the white merchants couldn't buy them, and the elaborate fiction of visiting for business purposes would be exposed. They're strangling us, Tom Martinez said bitterly. Can't shoot us, so they're starving us out. There has to be a way around this, Ezekiel insisted, but even he was struggling to see it. The solution came from an unexpected source, General Sherman, who arrived unannounced on a foggy morning. I hear you're having Commerce Clause troubles, he said without preamble. The federal government seems determined to destroy us, Ezekiel replied. The federal government is not monolithic, Sherman said carefully. Some elements want you destroyed. Others see value in what you've built. And you, I see a military advantage. Sherman spread out a map. Victorio still raids in the south. Other hostile bands operate in the north. But here in the middle is an island of peace. Do you understand what that means strategically? We're not interested in being a military outpost. No, but you are a buffer zone, a place where information flows, where moderate Apache have influence, where conflicts can be resolved before they become wars. Sherman looked at him directly. I need this place to survive, Mr. Marsh. The question is, what do you need from me? The negotiation that followed was complex. Sherman couldn't override federal policy, but he could interpret it creatively. The solution was declaring the trading post a military supply depot, where approved trades could occur for the purpose of maintaining regional stability. It's a fiction, Sherman admitted, but it's a fiction that serves everyone's interests. Will it hold? For now, long enough perhaps for wiser heads to prevail in Washington. The designation as a military depot brought unexpected benefits. Federal protection from raiders, both Apache and white. Regular supply shipments that could be traded freely.
and most importantly, a legitimate reason for Apache to be present as scout suppliers and intermediaries for military intelligence. Kalena became an official Army scout, which amused him greatly. They pay me to do what I was doing anyway, watching for trouble and preventing it. But the military presence also brought challenges. Young soldiers far from home and filled with prejudices didn't understand the delicate balance of the settlement. Fights broke out between soldiers and Apache men, usually over perceived slights or competition for the attention of women. One incident nearly destroyed everything. A drunk soldier named Patterson, no relation to Mrs. Patterson, made aggressive advances toward Etel. When she refused, he grabbed her, tearing her dress. The sound of ripping fabric was like a gunshot in the crowded trading post. Kolena was on him instantly, the two men crashing through tables and scattering goods. Other Apache warriors moved to help soldiers, reached for weapons, and for a moment violence seemed inevitable. "Stop!" Ezekiel's voice cut through the chaos. He stood between the two groups, hope in his arms. He'd scooped her up to keep her safe, but now her presence served a different purpose. "Look at this child," he said to both sides. "Is this what you want her to see? The people she loves trying to kill each other." The pause was enough for cooler heads to prevail. Captain Reynolds arrested Patterson, and Kalena, despite his justified anger, stood down. "Justice will be served," Reynolds promised. "Military justice." And it was. Patterson was court-martialed, publicly flogged, and dismissed from service. The harsh punishment sent a clear message: the trading post people were under military protection, all of them. "You handled that well," Sherman told Ezekiel during his next visit. "Another man might have let them fight." Fighting would have given our enemies exactly what they wanted: proof that Apache and whites can't coexist peacefully. And can they truly? In the long term, Ezekiel looked out at the settlement where his daughter played with children of every color, where his son was being raised by a village that transcended race, where his Apache wife worked alongside white Mexican and Chinese neighbors. They can if we raise a generation that doesn't know they're supposed to hate each other. That's a big if. It's the only if that matters. As Hope approached her 3rd birthday and Samuel began to walk, the settlement faced a new crisis. Chief Nalish, the wise leader who'd held everything together, fell ill. The Apache medicine woman and white doctor worked together, but both reached the same conclusion: his heart was failing. "I am old," Nalish said from his bed, surrounded by family and the settlement's leaders. "I have seen more change in 5 years than in the previous 50. It is time for new leadership." "Father, don't speak so," Ayana pleaded. "I speak truth, daughter. Always have." He looked at the gathered faces. "What we built here must survive my passing, but it needs new vision, younger strength." The question of succession was complicated. By Apache tradition, leadership could pass through various lines. Nalish had no sons, and his daughters, while respected, faced the challenge of their gender in traditional structures. "I name my successor," Nalish announced, his voice still carrying authority despite his weakness. "But not for chief of the Apache. That is for the tribe to decide. I name a successor for this place, for the trading post that has become more than trade." Everyone leaned in, expecting him to name Kolena or another warrior, perhaps even Kuruk. Instead, his eyes found Ezekiel. "You, my adopted son, who is no longer adopted but still my son, you will lead this place." The room erupted in surprised voices, but Nalish raised a trembling hand for silence. "Not as chief, you could never be Apache chief, but as—" "What is your white word, mayor? Yes, mayor of Apache Crossing, elected by all who live here, serving all who live here." "Father," Ezekiel said the word slipping out naturally after years of association, "I'm not qualified." "You are the only one qualified. Apache trust you because you saved my daughters. Whites trust you because you are white. Others trust you because you treat all fairly." Nalish coughed, specks of blood appearing. "More importantly, you have vision. You see not what is, but what could be." "The Apache won't accept white leadership." "Then share it," Kuruk suggested suddenly. "Co-leaders. Ezekiel for the whites, and others, someone else for the Apache." "Kolena," Nalish said immediately. "He has grown from warrior to wisdom. He and Ezekiel together can bridge what neither could alone." Kolena looked stunned. "I tried to kill him once." and now you would die for him as he would for you. That is the transformation we need. The election, the first of its kind in the territory, took place a week later. Every adult resident could vote regardless of race or gender itself, a revolutionary concept. The ballot was simple: accept Nalish's proposal for joint leadership or not. The vote was overwhelming, 387 for 23 against. Democracy, James Morrison said wonderingly. Real democracy, not the limited version we practice elsewhere. Chief Nalish lived long enough to see the transition of power, to watch Ezekiel and Cholena take their oaths of office in a ceremony that blended Apache tradition with American democratic ideals. He passed quietly 3 nights later, Ayanna holding one hand, Etel the other, his grandchildren playing at his feet, unaware they were losing the architect of their world. The funeral drew thousands. Apache from tribes across the region, white settlers from hundreds of miles away, Chinese railroad workers, Mexican traders, freed slaves from Texas, even a delegation from Washington who came to observe this unprecedented gathering. Victorio himself appeared standing at the edge of the crowd. When Ezekiel approached him, the war chief spoke quietly. Nalish was wrong about many things, but perhaps he was right about some things too. He looked at the mixed crowd all mourning together. I will give your way 1 year. If it survives, if it thrives, I will consider that perhaps the world has indeed changed. And if it doesn't, then I will fight until the last Apache is free or dead. Victorio walked away, but without the anger that had always driven him before. The year that followed tested every principle the settlement had built. Federal pressure increased despite Sherman's protection. Local white supremacists, emboldened by rising national tensions, began harassment campaigns. Some Apache, especially younger ones who'd never known the old wars, questioned why they should accept partial equality when they deserved full recognition. Through it all, Ezekiel and Cholena led together their partnership, evolving from suspicious cooperation to genuine friendship. They disagreed often, sometimes publicly, but always found compromise. You're too soft, Cholena would argue. Some enemies only understand strength. And you're too quick to fight, Ezekiel would counter. Some battles are won by not fighting them. Then we balance each other. That's the idea. The real victory came from an unexpected source. Sarah Chen's students, the first generation educated in the integrated school, began to make their mark. They won territorial spelling bees and mathematics competitions. Their essays on democracy and cultural cooperation were published in Eastern newspapers. When a delegation of congressmen visited, it was these children who guided them, switching effortlessly between languages, explaining how their community worked with an eloquence that amazed the politicians. These children, one congressman said to Ezekiel, they're what America claims to be but isn't yet. They're what America could be, Ezekiel corrected, if we have the courage to let them lead us there. Hope Now 4 had become something of a symbol herself. Photographers loved her, the perfect mixture of features, the bright intelligence in her unusual eyes, the way she moved between groups, bringing laughter and connection. But Ezekiel worried about the weight of symbolism on such young shoulders. She's just a child, he said to Ayanna one night as they watched Hope teaching Samuel and other toddlers a game that seemed to involve rules from 3 different cultures. She's our child, Ayanna corrected, born into a purpose whether we intended it or not. I wanted to give her choices. You did. You gave her the choice to be bridge or wall, to connect or divide. Look at her, she's already chosen. Indeed, Hope had a gift for bringing people together. When Chinese New Year celebrations accidentally conflicted with an Apache ceremony, it was Hope who suggested combining them, dragons and eagles dancing together in a spectacle that no one had seen before, but everyone remembered after. As the year Victorio had given them neared its end, a messenger arrived with news that would change everything. Congress had passed the Dawes Act, intending to break up tribal lands into individual allotments. It was meant to destroy tribal cohesion to force assimilation, but James Morrison saw opportunity. If we're clever about this, he explained to the assembled leadership, we can use it to legally protect the settlement. Individual Apache can own land directly adjacent to the trading post. The settlement becomes not a reservation issue, but a property rights issue. You're asking Apache to give up tribal land for individual ownership. Kalina said skeptically. I'm asking them to take a tactical loss for a strategic victory, James countered. Own the land around the trading post individually, and the government can't force relocation without violating its own property laws. It was controversial, divisive, but ultimately pragmatic. Many Apache took allotments surrounding the trading post, creating a buffer of legally protected, individually owned land that happened to form a community. Victorio arrived on the anniversary of his promise as expected. But he didn't come as a warrior. He came as a man who'd spent a year watching, thinking, perhaps changing. The settlement stands, he said simply to Ezekiel and Cholena. It does. My warriors grow fat and lazy trading instead of raiding. They grow prosperous and safe. The young ones learn white ways and forget Apache traditions. They learn both and create new traditions. Victorio was quiet for a long moment, then did something unprecedented. He laughed. Nalish always said I was too stubborn to see the river changing course. Perhaps he was right. Will you join us? Kalina asked. I am too old to change completely, but I will not oppose you. And perhaps I will trade here occasionally. It wasn't complete acceptance, but from Victorio, it was a miracle. That night, the settlement celebrated not just survival, but triumph. They'd faced federal opposition, racial hatred, internal division, and external threats. They'd survived them all, emerged stronger, proved that different peoples could not just coexist, but thrive together. As Ezekiel stood with his family, Ayana tall and proud beside him, hope on his shoulders, Samuel in his arms, he thought about the journey from that stormy night when he'd found 2 giant Apache women in his yard. Do you ever regret it? Tom Martinez asked, joining him. Everything that's happened since that night. How can I regret the best thing that ever happened to me, even with all the challenges, the danger, the uncertainty? Ezekiel looked out at the settlement, his home, their home, everyone's home. Apache and white Mexican and Chinese former slaves and new immigrants all building something unprecedented together, especially with all of that. Easy victories aren't worth winning. It's the impossible ones that matter. And this victory, is it won? No, Ezekiel admitted. It's won daily, with every choice to trust instead of fear, to build instead of destroy, to include instead of exclude. It will never be fully won because each generation will have to choose it again. That sounds exhausting. It sounds like life. Messy, complicated, beautiful life. The celebration continued around them. Music and laughter, children playing, adults planning for a future that once seemed impossible. The trading post had become Apache Crossing, had become something even greater, a beacon of what America could be when it lived up to its highest ideals. And at the center of it all, a family that shouldn't exist by the old rules stood as proof that love could conquer fear, that difference could be strength, that the impossible was just another word for something not yet tried. The story of Apache Crossing would be told for generations, growing in the telling, becoming legend. But for those who lived it, who built it day by day with patience and courage and hope, it was simpler than legend. It was home.